Hello, puppies and kittens. Welcome to another episode of Blasphemers Bible. We're on Joshua 15. And I note an absence of Mark. Hope he's okay. Missing one of our panel. The rest of you, how y'all doing?
I can't complain. Also, good meme. But I don't know if you want to tell people about the snake thing.
No.
Okay, okay. Arn loves snakes. He's got a huge hard-on for snakes. That's the snake.
Shut up.
Okay, well, since Lalandra's here, we will not be comparing snakes. For anyone who saw last week, I'm feeling a little better. I spent this week sick, but it is what it is. I'm just excited to see what we're gonna get up to in Joshua. Are we dividing up the land of people that we slaughtered already, or are we going to go into another genocide?
We're doing that for a while now.
Yeah. Right.
And the places that we haven't slaughtered yet. And dividing it all up.
Of course. It's important to sell the land to the highest bidder before the displaced people are even gone or their houses destroyed and burned and bombed and all the rest of it.
Family values.
Oh yeah. Our moral and just God.
Like, honestly, aside from a few maybe interesting historical notes, these chapters are going to be boring as shit.
No,
they will.
Too bad I have commentaries.
I know, but they're going to be boring as shit.
Yeah. Although this chapter is a bit interesting because this has the story of Othniel and Achsa.
There's a little bit more.
There's a little bit of there's some scattered narratives here and there, but it's basically just all interspersed.
Yeah.
Between dividing the land narrative.
I will say that the important chapter when we follow this book will be maybe the last one. Joshua 24, right, yeah. And maybe Joshua 22. I need to check what it.
Things start to really ramp up when we get to Judges.
Yes,
I love Judges. What a great book.
I love it too. I started commenting on it. I really love it.
Different kinds of atrocity in Judges.
I know, right? It's great.
Joshua is a little repetitive. It's just genocide, salting the earth, general violations of the Geneva Conventions, and stealing and plundering and whatnot. But it's just the same thing over and over and over again,
But there is a lot of room here for mistakes and repetition, and so
we're going to see that here.
There is stuff that will come up quite quickly.
Who's reading today?
I was thinking maybe we could split up the chapter. So if anyone wants to do the first half, and then I'll do from was it verse as it
20?
Start the list of names
20
to 20 to 21. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so if you want to read up to 20,
up to 19 actually.
Oh, okay, that works.
All right, so who's reading up to 19?
Well, it'd still be okay. So it is up to 20, but what Tomer means is through 19.
Through 19. Okay. So is it Lilith reading up through 19?
She might enjoy this one. Ooh, you just muted yourself.
Sorry. I have the cough candy and coffee. I should be able to manage the first half of 15. We are Joshua 15, yes?
Yeah.
Yes.
The allotment for the tribe of Judah, clan by clan, extended down to the territory of Edom, to the desert of Zin in the extreme south. Their southern boundaries started from the bay at the southern end of the Salt Sea, crossed south of Scorpion Pass, continued on to Zin, and went over to the south of Kadesh Barnea. Then it ran past Hezron up to Adar and curved around to Karka. Then it passed along to Azmon and joined the Wadi of Egypt, ending at the sea. This is their southern boundary. The eastern boundary is the Salt Sea as far as the mouth of the Jordan. The northern boundary started from the Bay of the Sea at the mouth of the Jordan, went up to Beth Hogla, and continued north of Beth Arabah to the stone of Boan, son of Reuben. The boundary then went up to Debir from the valley of Achor and turned north to Gilgal, which faces the pass of Adumim, south of the gorge.
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you. South of the gorge. It continued along to the waters of En Shemesh and came out at En Rogal.
Just to be clear, I feel like that's the first time ever on this show that Tomer has said the words "you're right" just to anyone.
No.
Especially about pronunciation.
Especially.
Thank
you're doing
you,
great,
Tomer.
Joe.
I will remember this forever.
And Rogel.
Thank you.
And the Rogal, yes.
Rogel, actually.
I wouldn't mind a Rogel.
I know you would.
Bad. Okay, it continued along the waters of En Shemesh and came out at En Rogal. Then it ran up the valley of Ben Hinnon along the southern slope of the Jebusite city, that is Jerusalem. From there, it climbed to the top of the hill west of the Hinnom Valley, at the northern end of the valley of Rephaim. From the hilltop, that boundary headed toward the spring of the waters of Nephtoah, came out at the towns of Mount Ephron, and went down towards Baal, that is Kirath Jearim. Then it curved westward from Bala to Mount Seir, ran along the northern slope of Mount Jearim.
Yarim.
Yeah, J is
Yarim.
Yeah.
Yarim, yeah. That is Kethlon. Continued down to Beth Shemesh and crossed to Timnah. It went to the northern slope of Ekron, turned towards Sikkeron, passed along to Mount Bala, and reached Jabneel. The boundary ended at the sea. The western boundary is the coastline of the Great Sea. These are the boundaries around the people of Judah by their clans. In accordance with the Lord's command to him, Joshua gave to Caleb, son of Zephnuah, a portion in Yephnuah.
Yephuneh. But is what?
Son of Yephuneh.
Never mind.
Yephuneh.
Yeah, but I heard a Z. Is that
no, not a Z. No, although it's
okay.
it's like cut at the end of a line in the middle of a word, which makes it a bit weird to read. But anyway. Yephnuah, a portion. Joshua gave to Caleb, son of Yephnuah, a portion in Judah. Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron. Arba was the forefather of Anak. From Hebron, Caleb drove out the 3 Anakites, Shisheh, Aiman, and Talmai, descendants of Anak. From there, he marched against...
Talmai is, just want to say that Talmai is also the name that's like the Hebrew Aramaic name for Ptolemy.
Yeah,
so
it is, but it has no connection.
We
saw that previously, actually.
It's interesting, though.
Yeah.
And a little ironic.
Especially as names of Anakites.
Oh, well, the evil Anakites. Their 6 fingers.
Yeah, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai.
Mm-hmm.
From there, he marched against the people living in Debir, formerly called Kiriath Sephir, or Sefer. And Caleb said, I will give my daughter Aksha in marriage to the man who attacks and captures Kiriath Sefer. Oniath, son of Kenaz.
Othniel,
son of Kenaz, Caleb's brother, took it. So Caleb gave his daughter Aksha to him in marriage.
Achsa.
That's a hard one.
It's I can't do too much phlegm or I'll go into a
of course. You can say Achsa as well, whatever you choose.
Yeah, I think if you see CH, it's either going to be Ch or K.
I
so
have
you
it
can
as
say whichever one is easier.
S-A-H in this translation. So that
with just a C, not a CH. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, so yeah,
I
just
do
read
know
it
the
fast, I guess.
SCH or sh.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it's weird, that one.
we've got transliterations here, so and there's going to be some variation in the transliteration, but it is what it is.
That's true.
So Caleb gave his daughter Achsah to him in marriage. One day, when she came to Othniel, she urged him to ask her father for a field. When she got off her donkey, Caleb asked her, "What can I do for you?" She replied, "Do me a special favor. Since you have given me land in the Negev, give me also springs of water." So Caleb gave her the upper and lower springs. This is the inheritance of the tribe of Judah, clan by clan.
Yeah.
The word of the Lord.
This is a strange little story as well that's like inserted here.
Yeah, because like I mean, this
And it's
entire
written weird as
thing.
well.
Yeah, this entire also question. Do you guys hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Am I
Yeah.
quiet or
Yeah.
anything?
No, you're
Yeah.
fine.
No.
You seem
Okay.
fine.
Yeah, because I noticed on a different recording I was doing that I seemed quiet, so wanted to make sure. Should have checked that before the show actually. But you know, there are a few interesting things of note about this, right? So like this, obviously, like we continue on with the portioning of the land, but this story about Othniel, right? He's going to be the first of the judges, and this like story within this allotment scene is kind of meant to because this Caleb was one of the spies, so this kind of explains why he is why what was it, his territory is controlled. Let's see here. Yeah. So the story explains why descendants of Othniel controlled not only Debir but 2 springs near Hebron.
Yeah.
And I mean, first of all, we do kind of we've already talked about this before. We know this was not written like during the time of Joshua.
Any of it.
So it was written far later. But in the early days, even like the early Deuteronomistic history scholarship days, it was already noted that like this was like, oh, this seems like some kind of later addition, and this stemmed from maybe like the 7th century or something. But the thing is, it would make a lot of sense placed in the make a lot more sense placed in the 7th century, probably in the late 7th century, because what we are going on to describe is a whole bunch of places which, even by the time of that century, I mean, some of them were well known, some of them are still well known, some of them are not. But either way, like what we're doing is we're seeming to explain like already known kind of boundaries. So while in this one it's like this allotment scene, in reality this would have functioned as like, here's the land that we have, and we're kind of saying that this is our owed land. This is the thing that is allotted to us.
I think you're right. I think it's also about establishing a pedigree. For people who remember the few narrative elements from before, all of the law got so damn boring. Caleb and Joshua were the 2 of the 12 spies that were sent out in pairs. 10 of them said, "We can't do this." 2 of them, Joshua, who obviously the book is named after, he was, Moses passes the torch to him, but Caleb too, being the other good spy and the only one of that generation permitted to survive and enter the promised land, because remember, everybody else had to die in the desert because they doubted God and got scared of giants, and how very dare they. Then you have this idea of course Caleb is owed everything because he's blessed of the Lord and did right and all the rest of it. But yeah, I think it's definitely about establishing a pedigree, and that's sort of one of the odd things and dichotomies about when your the mythology of your nation is based on conquest and slaughtering the existing inhabitants and taking it for yourself. And God gave us this land because we killed everybody, so it's mine now. To establish a pedigree to keep you from doing that amongst yourselves. To be like, okay, God gave us this land. We slaughtered everyone. Aren't we great? Now you have to stay within the existing borders because those were also ordained of God, and stop trying to stab your neighbor for his farm.
I should also note. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say it very much seems to be like these are the borders of the tribes at a much later date. It doesn't make sense to be the original borders because we've got just ignoring the Philistines and the Phoenicians, it's like the land is much bigger than it would have been. Like Judah goes from the Dead Sea all the way to the Mediterranean from the south up until Jerusalem, and like Simeon is like inside it. Like they've only got a few towns, which you could say, that the Simeon tribe had dwindled in size by the time of Joshua, but that doesn't make too much sense.
Of course it was, I mean, of course it was written after, but the idea is that, God not only gave us this land by giving us the power to slaughter all our neighbors, he also foreordained, prophesied that these would be the borders, and then we went out and did what he told us, as opposed to what's actually happening, which is that we're drawing borders after the fact and saying, okay, everybody stop killing each other. We have to be peaceful now, because otherwise we can't have a functioning society. So
it seems. Oh yeah, let's do that.
Damian McLagan says, I'm actually here at the start of the stream. Yay! Question of curiosity. What is your opinion on which biblical religion is the most toxic? Well,
I don't know what biblical religion means, because
probably Abraham.
It's probably Christianity, Islam, and Judaism.
Yeah, but the thing is with the word biblical.
Yeah, if there's
if the Muslims would say that they were, the Muslims would say that the Christians and the Jews and that the Abrahamic faiths were all the people of the book.
Mm-hmm.
So they're all, in a sense, they're all biblical religions in that regard.
Right.
They have a book.
As to which one is the most toxic, it probably depends on what period in history we're looking at.
That's very much so.
True, yeah.
Yeah, like Christianity during the medieval times for sure.
Honestly,
Islam, but nowadays it could be the other way around depending where you are.
Hitchens spoke out against Islam frequently, and people say, why do you pick on Islam? And he said, if this was the early half of the 20th century, I'd be picking on Christianity. It was the greater threat then. Now they seem to be vying for prominence because Islam is still atrocious where it has political control, and Christianity is rising fascism in the Western world. And honestly, as far as I can tell, whichever one is being taken most seriously and most literally is the most toxic. Although Harris did have a point when he pointed out that from the teachings of Jesus, you can at least get hippy dippy love train shit if you pick correctly, which is a little harder to do with an Arabian warlord.
Yeah, and you do have to omit certain things, like everybody that doesn't believe in me, bring them before me so I can kill them. Dara O'Kane says, why isn't Mormonism the major religion in America? American exceptionalism mixed with Christianity saying Jesus was American and the Bible stories are set up here is appealing emotionally. Why don't you ask that question tomorrow during our reading Joseph Smith? I've already heard Bryce's explanation of this, but Mormonism was very nearly the national religion. The Mormons had an army that was greater than that of the United States, and it was very nearly a war. And Joseph Smith was very nearly our president.
Oh God.
Yeah. So then SJL says in the KJV, instead of got off her donkey, it said lifted off her ass, or lighted off her ass.
Listen, we light off each other's asses all the time.
Well, there is some interesting comment when we'll get to there. which, yeah, we'll get to there. I also wanted to mention the Dozeman wrote. Let's see. The composition of Joshua 15 is in the post-exilic period when the priestly description of the Promised Land in Numbers 34, 1-12 was available to the author, and the 12-tribe system of pan-Israelite identity was firmly established. The late development of the 12-tribe system eliminate Alt's conclusion that a version of the tribal borders was a source document for the author of Joshua 15. The description of the tribal territory of Judah, as well as the entire 12-tribe system of land division, is the literary creation of the author of Joshua, writing in the post-exilic period. Okay.
Do you agree, Lawrence, that this division is post-exilic and not?
Oh, I think this entire section
Josianic?
is probably a later edition. Yeah.
Yeah, like later, like how later is what I'm saying, because
No, so
the
like
original Deuteronomist is during the reign of Josiah, let's say. Then how much later are we thinking this is?
Yeah, I mean, like after, post-exilic would. I'm not sure. I mean, aside from this, I'm not sure if we have sources on, from the, maybe from like the 5th century, about how the land was allotted. I actually forget if there was a description of it in Ezra or Nehemiah or anything.
They probably had an older
most of the
source.
things that I remember from Ezra and Nehemiah are the stuff about the stuff about don't mate with the damn Persians. It was very much like keep it in the family kind of thing. They're like, hey, thanks Persians for all the help, but we're not gonna fuck you. That was a very entertaining piece of literature, but I'm not sure if there is an allotment in there, or not an allotment scene, but it would be here is where we live kind of scene. I forget if that's in there, but I could the thing is this the majority of these chapters, up until was it 22 or 23 or something, I think I mentioned it on one of the previous shows, that all seems like it was post-exilic.
Okay. All right. No, and that's an interesting thing too, because of course they want to bring the idea that we're coming back to our ancestral allotments, and there are definitely hints in Genesis about what the trade of Issachar was versus basically the various tribes in sort of this one by the sea and this one this and this and that, which would hint at sort of tribal lineages and how their culture developed around whatever the local ecology was. But yeah, it's interesting to see if we can divine any differences between older and later sources, because admittedly, we're the pickings are a bit scant for anything to cross-reference.
Yeah, unfortunately.
I would think that the Deuteronomistic author of this section would have probably had some older city list or something that it was working off, because we have instances of places where he gives it a name and then said that is a different name. So it's like it seems to imply that he has an old name and then he's identified it with a place that he knows that currently exists and saying like these are the same place.
Like if he was
And
trying to
sometimes-
pretend he was writing earlier about New York, and he'd be like, New Amsterdam, now known as New York.
Yeah, that sort of thing.
Yeah, we get one later in this chapter even.
Yeah, and then sometimes you have the same places mentioned twice, slightly different. And they're probably the same place, so it could also be, like maybe
That
working
could
from a
make
list or something.
sense, as boundaries obviously would abut, at various points.
Yeah, like you have the same places mentioned in a boundary list, and then it's named as a city within a region, and then
we lost
name comes up
Isaac.
again.
Well said, Isaac.
Slightly different.
Sorry,
what
you
happened?
froze for a second.
Yeah, your internet froze,
okay.
I guess.
Oh, I was just saying, like, there's one place I think that gets mentioned like 3-4 times because it's like in the border, and then it's in Judah's place, and then it's in Simeon's place, and yeah, so.
So there's no consistency too. Figures.
All right, should we start on? The
Yeah, the
comment?
commentary. Yes, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll start on verses 1 through 12. Butler comments, the first lot is given to the tribe of Judah. Its border comes from the tradition behind Numbers 34, verses 3 to 6. This represents not the order of birth of the sons of Jacob, but the order of political priority for the ultimate editor of the biblical narrative, whose major concern is with Judah. Judah is the first to receive its inheritance, the last to fall, and the only remaining hope for restoring the lot of the people of God. According to David Howard, the detailed border description, quote, is a dynamic, vibrant boundary, almost lifelike in its movement, end quote. Yet McConville and Williams maintain that overlap in the territories of Simeon and Judah and between chapters 15 and 19, quote, suggests that the lists before us do not come in their entirety from a single time. The text as we have it, therefore, appears to have undergone expansion and alteration over the time of Israel's life in the land. Quote.
That makes sense. Yeah, it seems one of the things about the way that the borders are kind of defined is it seems to be like here is a line from, let's say, from east to west, from the southern tip of the Dead Sea to the Mediterranean, and then it kind of uses terminology like encircled and went ascended and descended, and it seems to imply that this is a line that's going from east to west, and then ascended is going north, let's say, towards Jerusalem, and descended is down, and then like encircled could be like, oh, it diverged away from the straight line to encompass this place. So we know that this place is further south of the line, so the border had to go south, dipped around to bring it in.
It would make sense probably more if we were looking at a map, because this is a very hilly and craggy region in certain areas, and you kind of got to follow the land a little bit.
Yeah, that's also true. Yeah, there is actual like ups and downs as well. Like,
I'm trying to remember where Caleb was from. Anyway, sorry.
Okay, on verse 8, the valley of Ben Hinnom, in Hebrew, Gay Ben Hinnom. This site is more famously associated with child sacrifice during King Manasseh's rule, as seen in 1 Kings 23:10. Jeremiah calls it the valley of slaughter, in Hebrew, Gay Haharga, in Jeremiah 7:32. For when the temple be destroyed, the valley will be full of dead people. From this emerged the notion of Gehenom, the place where the wicked are punished after their death by fire. And Talmud Sukkah 32b reads, there are 2 date palms in the valley of Ben Hinnom, and smoke arises from between them, and that site is the entrance of Gehenna.
Yeah, so that was actually another thing I wanted to mention, how it kind of passed over the significance of the Valley of Ben Hinnom and the importance of this in the time of Manasseh, and even up until like the exilic period would have been pretty important. This would have and this is only this is just kind of an assumption that I'm making, but part of me feels like this is where we would have had some other kind of it wouldn't have just been like, oh, but also the Valley of Ben Hinnom, because in the other periods when it was important to talk about, even polemically, the section would have been, or we see this in like the texts of like the prophets, for example, and even once we get later into the Deuteronomistic history, we see far more concentration on what was happening at the Valley of Ben Hinnom. So I feel like just the mention of the place itself without any kind of qualifier on its significance speaks to a time when that wasn't really a problem in their minds anymore. So again, like post-exilic kind of stuff here, because like in the prophetic texts that we do have references to the Valley of Ben Hinnom, it seems far more significant to talk about, something that's far closer in time to I guess the time of Manasseh.
Now on verse 13, according to the commandment of the Lord to Joshua, I'm reading from the KJV here. Then Dozeman comments, the Hebrew al-pi Yehovah LeYoshua, according to the command or mouth, literally, of Yahweh to Joshua, does not indicate a direct divine command to Joshua, as Rashi wrote. It signifies the divine authority of the command to which Joshua was bound. Joshua 17:4 illustrates the distinction between divine oral command and actions that follow the command of Yahweh. The daughters of Zelophehad root their claim to land in an oral command to Moses. Quote, Yahweh commanded Siva Moses to give us an inheritance, end quote. Once the command is given, they state that Moses acted, quote, according to the commandment of Yahweh, end quote, in Hebrew, al pi Yehovah. Similarly here, Joshua does not receive a direct divine command, in Hebrew tzivah, from the deity, but he does act in accordance with a prior divine command, in Hebrew pi Yehovah. On verse 14, the three Anakites. They are mentioned in Numbers 13:22. Butler notes that Judges 1:11 tells that the tribe of Judah killed them. Ahituv writes that there might have been stories about these giants, much like what is told about Goliath and his brothers. He also notes that two of the names, Sheshai and Talmai, are Hurrian and not Semitic, and writes that perhaps at the core of the story of the three Anakites are pre-Israelite traditions regarding the ancient rulers of Hebron, which the sons of Caleb might have received from the Canaanites of Hebron. Dozeman notes Brian Doak's opinion that there are Davidic themes with the emphasis on Caleb as a giant killer. On verse 16,
there is. I just want to mention there's a phrase in the verse before that where it says, "Arba was the father of Anak." So the word Arba also means four. So Kiryat Arba could mean the village, not village. Kiryat is like city, the city of four or the city of Arba. So there's like a rabbinic, like I think Rashi mentions it. Like there's two opinions. One is that Arba was the name of a giant, and his son was called Anak, which is literally means this is like a name for some giant. And then he had those three sons. So it could be the city of that guy, or it could be for Anak and his three sons are the four giants. So it's the city of these four giants. It could be an etiology of.
Yeah, I remember coming across myths of the Anakites being, having giants and also having like 6 fingers or something referenced in some Christian fiction and things that seem to be referenced to sort of a mythology that these were, special people in some way, not in a good way, like in a bad, Nephilim type of way. But
yeah.
I glanced.
6 fingers, you've got Nephilim blood. Is that what it's like?
I think so. I don't actually know the origin of that myth. I wish I could. I read it in like some fiction, but it was one of those things that was tied up with some other sort of Christian mythology, and I was like, they must have got this from somewhere. It's probably somewhere in the Middle Ages. Never managed to track it down.
Yeah.
But I did notice, like, I thought of Caleb, and they said he asked for an allotment with Judah. So I flipped back to Numbers 13, and Caleb is actually the representative from the tribe of Judah. And here they're listed in their birth order from Reuben, Simeon, Judah, Issachar, yada, yada, yada. To the tribe of Gad, no one is given, except for Benjamin. I don't know. There's a bit of a hierarchy thing with the sons of the actual wives versus the concubines. But Manasseh, a tribe of Joseph, is Gadi, son of Susi. Sorry. And and Hoshea, son of Nun, is the tribe of Ephraim. That's Joshua. So here, when the allotments are given, it's Judah first, which is Caleb first, then Ephraim and Manasseh in 16 and 17, just looking ahead, glancing, and then, on from there. So it's interesting that they're creating this connection between Judah and the tribes of Joseph, as they were later known.
Interesting.
Anyway.
Yeah, I think the rabbis say, like, so Caleb was given Hebron first, and then the allotment happened, and it just happened to be that Judah was given the area where Hebron was inside of.
Right, of course.
Well, not just happened, obviously. But
well, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure they used the magic rocks.
Yeah.
Okay, on verse 16, Achsa, The name is derived from eches, which is a type of anklet or bangle, as in Proverbs 7:22 and Isaiah 3:18. Chazal in Talmud Temurah 16a wrote that she was called Achsa because anyone who saw her became angry, ko'es, at his own wife, since she's not as beautiful as Achsa.
I never understood why they didn't think it like, characters having names that refer to their living, like, later life experience don't make sense outside of fiction. Like, I don't know how people didn't notice that early.
Now,
when the name refers to like something about their birth, okay, that's fine. But like when the name is like, oh, they were called this because of the blah blah blah, they were so beautiful. It's like, yeah, but they didn't know that when they called them that.
No, babies
make
all
sense.
look like wrinkled old men,
I don't
but
know.
it's
Mm.
yeah. I mean, you could give the excuse that they're written about by their nickname or their sort of title,
Yeah, that's
but
true.
yeah, it's definitely very fictional.
Now, Ahituv writes that there are some hints to similar heroic stories regarding David, who also received Michal, daughter of Saul, for his bravery. The motif of hero wins girl, especially the king's daughter, is a common trope in legends and folktales. Galil writes that Achsa's character was based on other wise women in the Bible, such as the woman of Tekoa, 2 Samuel 14 verses 1 to 20, the woman from Abel of Bet Macha in 2 Samuel 20, 17 to 19, and others.
Yeah, there is also another rabbinical tradition that about this story, that it's not about conquering a city. It's about, because it says Kiryat Sefer, which literally means like the city of the book. And so they kind of imply that this is about Caleb announced that I will give my daughter in marriage to anyone who can teach us the laws that we lost during the conquest. So there's like a tradition that like 115 commandments from God were lost to the memory of the people during the conquest period, and Othniel was the one who like remembered it all, and so he taught it, and therefore Achsa was like, I will marry this guy because he's a scholar.
I mean,
Now,
I
sorry.
would totally work that way, but somehow I don't think that was the original intent of the hero gets girl story.
Yeah.
Now, on Othniel, son of Kenaz, he is named as the first of the Israelite judges, according to Judges 3, 9 through 11. The term brother of Caleb can mean either that he was Caleb's brother, according to Talmud Temurah 16a, Rashi, Kara, and Kimchi, or that he was his kingsman, according to JPS. According to Judges 3:9 and 1 Chronicles 4:13, Othniel was the son of Canaan and the younger brother of Caleb. Othniel is also described as a clan or tribe in 1 Chronicles 27:15.
It would
Now-
make sense.
Yeah, I think
Now-
it's there's the idea is that Caleb is the son of Yefunah, but then he is called the Kenizites because his mother remarried after his father died, someone called Kenaz, which is also the father of Othniel. So the idea is that Othniel was like his half brother from like his mother's second marriage.
Mhm.
So yeah, his daughter married his half brother.
I suppose every degree off of direct incest is better. It's still giving a very Targaryen vibe, but
Yeah, it's further than what's his name? Not Moses. Who married his aunt? Moses' father married his aunt. Yeah, I think that's that. Yes,
I
I think
can't
it's
remember.
similar.
I mean, Abraham is
yeah.
supposed to have married his half sister, so I mean, it's all fucked up. So
Oh, let's see.
Got a couple more comments. We got Trevor and Wright said, did the Anakites really exist in the ancient past? And if so, what exactly was their ethnicity?
I don't think they did.
I
The
wanna
thing is,
see-
it also might like polemically refer to some other groups, right?
Mhm.
So
Mm.
maybe there was like a certain tribe they had in mind, but either way, like in this takeover of the of the land. We get this in a lot of histories of the time. They tend to make up groups or exaggerate the traits of certain groups.
Do you think that there's fabrications and exaggerations in the holy word of God?
Yeah, right. Yeah, sorry about all the reading.
Yeah. Apologies. Well,
So when you
and
say when you say the Anakites are not really people, they were like a polemic against perhaps another group. Or we talk about like when like when the aristocracy would refer to someone as a Philistine.
Well, I mean, the Philistines were real, but
Right,
yeah.
but you would refer to someone who is not a Philistine. You would call them a Philistine. If I was called a
If they were
Philistine for
vulgar.
drinking my beer out of the bottle.
Yes, that it's a way to call someone uncouth and vulgar, which, considering that the Philistines were actually in many senses probably far more civilized than the Israelites at that time, is really rather ironic. But it's it's the difficulty is, especially so much later in history, when there's so little if any written history surviving from the time and place where this term came into existence, it's very difficult to connect the polemics of their enemies and the stories that people would tell about their enemies, oh, they're giants and they're mutants and they're blah 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 blah. It's very hard to connect that with which real ethnic group in the area who existed and were actually just normal people. It's hard to tell and connect that, because it's their enemies sitting around the campfire telling ghost stories about them. It's not their actual behavior.
Yeah, we kind of see a similar thing in early Greek historiography too, where like they would sometimes include in their mythic genealogies some real tribes, obviously, some real groups that that existed at the time, but then like in this genealogy they would also have like groups that didn't exist, more like semi-mythical ones even. So yeah, quasi-historical, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, like eventually it becomes more and more mythical once you go further back. And that happened in they kind of did the same thing in Egypt, but it was less polemical, where they had an initial like the first pharaoh in Egyptian literature is often thought to be Horus himself, or Ra, I forget which one. Eventually they kind of fused, but you have like a god being the first pharaoh, and then eventually after this lineage of, you can check the it's called the Turn canon. You can check the first generation of rulers were gods, and then the second generation of rulers were like spirit kings. So now we're talking about maybe there's like some historical reference in there to some actual early pharaohs, right, before they were pharaohs, whatever it might be.
Are we talking about like the Sumerian king list, where the first,
Something like it? Yep.
let's say the first generation of kings ruled for 30,000 years each?
It's like that, yeah.
And once Rome got emperors, they all
This is
wanted to trace their lineage to Romulus and Remus, who totes for real existed, bro, and wound their calendar around it. And so, yeah, it's very hard to find. It's not a clear crux breaking into literal history. It's a fade in.
It's a gradient.
Things that are possibly real, slightly.
Yeah, it's
Right.
a
Couple more.
gradient from things that are definitely real now to stuff that might have been real to stuff that definitely wasn't. So it's a very common theme in Near Eastern historiography. So yeah, but eventually you get this reign of spirit kings, and then even on the Turin canon, this is the same list. It contains not just those spirit kings, but then also starts to get into those real kings that we actually do know about, that can be historically verified. So the mixed history was the divide is nothing like the way we think of it today, like where one is just false and the other is just true. They weren't thinking of history that way.
I got a couple more comments. Eric Wander says, who drove the Anakim from Hebron? Chapter 11:21 says it was Joshua who utterly destroyed their cities, but here is Caleb who drove them out. Is this a contradiction?
You could like read it.
Um,
Oh, like Joshua is attributed to the seizure of um the was it Hebron? Yeah, like Caleb was the one who conquered it, but it is attributed to Joshua because he is superior. I've read like a commentary on this. Like he is attributed to something that he didn't actually do. Like I think similar to that is how Solomon is described as capturing a city, but he didn't really.
Oh, yeah,
I
he
mean,
wasn't
it.
a warrior himself, but he was the king under which it was captured. It was sort of a, although Joshua was, I suppose he's the general, so everything is attributed to him kind of under his leadership, even if he wasn't literally in there
Yeah,
with his.
this is a good question because I think in Judges, it seems to imply the city wasn't conquered until after Joshua died. Because you have like I've got a note here, Judges 1:20.
Hmm.
It seems so that it wasn't captured, and so maybe and like this story is like happened after he already died. So the verse that says that Joshua did capture Hebron seems contradict that at least.
Fair.
Okay,
Good
and
catch.
then Matt White says, Isaac, it's nominative determinism. Your name prophesies your profession, as in Turi King, who authenticated the remains of Richard III in 2013.
That's quite funny. Yeah, the person who, yeah, Turi King. That's cute.
When a mother gives a name, she reveals her hope.
Yeah, but
Okay.
we don't. I think nominative determinism sounds like a religious belief to me.
Are we done with
No,
Omer's?
Oh no, not yet.
no, yet not yet. There's still more. We have verse 18. I have some comments on verse 18. So on she urged him, in Hebrew it's vatesitehu, from the root samech vav taf, to incite, allure, or instigate, according to BDB Dictionary. Nelson writes that the narrative of MT creates some perplexity in that Achsa urges her husband to a task that she herself goes on to perform. Alexandrinus, Vaticanus, and Targum read, she advised him, reducing the tension. Lucianic recension to the Septuagint reads, he advised her. Vulgate reads, she was moved by her husband. And Peshitta, she was tempted. On that same verse, to ask her father for a field. Septuagint reads, I will ask my father for a field. And Butler comments, the problem that in the following scene the wife confronts her father is to be explained in the sense that she gained her husband's agreement before carrying out her plan. Certainly, this explanation is better than having her excite her father by asking him for a field, as Winter Nielsen would argue, on the basis of Othniel being a, quote, locally minor participant of the previous unit, end quote. Aud may be correct in following Septuagint, in restoring, quote, saying, I will ask my father, end quote. Though Nelson says this simply reduces the tension, concluding that, quote, empty is preferable as difficult, but not impossible, end quote. On when she
Yeah,
got off, sorry.
I just say yeah. It's weird that it's like she asks her husband and then she ends up asking like it's like did he refuse to ask? Did she just do it anyway? Like it's like feels like there's a bit missing maybe.
Mm-hmm. And then when she got off her donkey, in the Hebrew for she got off is vatitznach. The exact meaning is unclear. Targum and Peshitta read, she got down from her donkey. This reading is supported by Rashi, Kimchi, BDB Dictionary, and most modern commentators. Septuagint, however, reads, she cried out from her donkey, which, according to Dozeman, suggests a different interpretation of the Hebrew or a different Hebrew vorlage. Vulgate has, she sighed as she sat on her donkey. Kara wrote that she lowered her head while she was on the donkey to speak to her husband. Butler notes that the verb tzanach has caused, quote, all sorts of scholarly consternation and conjecture, end quote. Noting GR driver's reading, she broke wind. Yep.
Oh, men are so gross. And also, what would it matter? Like, does she get off the donkey before asking daddy to give her the land? Does she not? It doesn't fucking matter. The point is, she's like, Papa Pieta, Pieta.
Okay, all right.
And then
So she
he
either
dies
got
and
off
she
the
gets what she
donkey,
wants.
she either got off the donkey, or she lighted off her ass. And now that we know the way that she lighted off her ass was that she farted herself off of her mule.
Okay, is anyone else
Yeah,
thinking
rocket
of Family
propelled.
Guy, how God created the Big Bang by lighting?
Yeah, I mean, the driver's reading is found in NEB, but he notes that later on, Bowling writes that this has not found wide acceptance. Yeah.
I wonder why.
To the notion that she used
Shade.
flatulence as a form of thrust.
Like, how does this help the story? Like, if I get down and I'm all like, Daddy, please give me this thing I want. Like, what purpose would that doesn't work. It doesn't work. It doesn't work from a narrative point of view. It doesn't work from if we imagined any of this was real, you wouldn't mention that.
Yeah,
So
it
I'm
seems to
actually
be
kind of
with-
hold up. I have an idea. So this is what that's in verse 18, right?
Mhm.
So we're
Yeah.
looking at 15, 18. So if I think my
Wide
guess is that they're using a
acceptance.
form of anabino here in the Greek at least, and that might tell us a little bit of something. So it would be like got down from, but
I noted that Septuagint has "she cried out" from a donkey.
oh, she cried out in the Septuagint.
Ah.
Yes.
Out of which end?
Okay.
Yeah, it does seem to be like maybe this story was referring to some sort of ancient etiquette about women requesting something and like how they would have done it and what the way to do it was, and we've just lost the context for it. Like like why can't
That
she
does
just
make
ask him
sense.
herself? Why did she even ask why does she even ask her husband in the first place? Why does she wait until why does she like indicate something and then her father has to ask her what's wrong?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. So
We just don't know.
okay. So maybe. So the translation that I have, as she dismounted from her donkey, Caleb said to her, "What do you wish?" So my guess is that this is almost like a prostration kind of thing, to where like you have to, if you're going to ask someone that is hierarchically above you in some way of something, you are going to be lower than them. So maybe this is somehow related to that. But
So you think it is a cultural thing, some sort of formal bow or prostration that would
something like
indicate
that.
make a request?
Well, yeah, maybe it's just rude to talk to someone from a higher
the back of
place
the
when
donkey
you're
seat.
When you're
Yeah.
asking them something, that would be my guess.
And finally, on verse 19, do me a special favor, in Hebrew, tena li bracha. The word bracha generally means blessing, but can also mean gift, according to Ahituv, Butler, Dozeman, and JPS. Targum reads inheritance, Rashi reads sustenance. Kara and Kimchi wrote that bracha could also be read as brecha, with a pool, i.e. a land full of water. And Nelson comments, later generations would base their claim to territory lost to the Edomites after the destruction of Judah upon these traditions of the conquest of Hebron and Debir and of Caleb's wedding gift to Achsah. This tale shares several themes with the other land grant narratives in Joshua. For one thing, it illustrates that the ancestors obediently carried out what Moses and Yahweh had commanded, as seen in verses 13 to 19, 14, 6 and 9, and 17, 4. A more subtle theme rests on the narrative circumstance that such land grants often resulted from attempts to solve problems and disputes. Verse 19, 17, 3, and 14 verses, 19, 17, and 3, verses 14 to 18. This indicates that even in the foundational period, Yahweh's gift of the land was to some degree provisional and required a continuing struggle on the part of the people to realize it completely. verses 16 and 17, 18.
That sounds disturbingly like jihad.
I have some comments by Origin.
Oh God,
Yep,
let me
we do.
guess.
Yeah, I'll just
Yeah.
I have this summarization of them, according at least for 1 through 12.
Just give us the funniest bits.
Does Origin make reference to flatulence as a form of propulsion?
No, no.
Okay.
No, but bets early, bets on women being manipulative.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay. The division of the promised land is understood typologically. Judah's inheritance, which is past Edom and the wilderness of Sin, may be reached after dealing with earthly things and passing through the desert of temptation. On the path to heavenly reward, the hills of Akrabim must be ascended, signifying the treading down of scorpions, because Akrabim in Hebrew means scorpions. Uh, and let's see, regarding 13 to 19, understood typologically, Caleb's possession of his inheritance represents the destruction of vain humility and the eradication of the unholy, unwise, and unstable. Othniel's conquering of the city of letters represents the receipt of divine revelation. Yeah. Yeah, that's it.
Oh well. All right.
Okay.
Should I start reading the next section?
Please.
Yes.
Let's go. Okay. This was the portion of the tribe of the Judahites by their clans. The towns at the far end of the tribe of Judah, near the border of Edom, in the Negev, were Kabseel, Eder, and Yagur. And then there was Kina, Dimona, and Ada. Kedesh, Chatzor, Yitnan. Zif, Telem, Baalot. Chatzar, Chatata, Kiryat Chetzron, and which is Chatzor. Amam, Shma, Moladata, Molada, Chatragada, Cheshmon, and Bet Palet, or Pelet. Chatza Shoal, Be'er Shava, and Bizyot Ya. Or Bizyot Ya could also be called Bizyot Yo.
Depends.
Yeah. Ba'ala, Iyim, Etzem, El Talad, Kisil, Charma, Tsiklag, Madmana, Sansana, Levaot, Shilchim, Ayin, Rimon. All these towns was 29 and their villages. In the lowland, Eshta'al, Tzar'a, Ashna, Zanoach, Ain, Ein Ganim, Tapuach, and Einam. Yarmut, Adulam, Socho, Azekah. Sha'arayim, Aditayim, Gedera, Gederotayim, 14 towns with their villages. Senan, Chadasha, and Migdal Gad, Dilan, Yakteel, Lachish.
Yoktiel.
Sorry?
It's Yoktiel.
Yeah, it's with a ya.
It's a Yo.
Yeah. Okay.
Yo.
Okay. This is one of the things I'm really bad at differentiating between the comets Gadal and comets Katan. Yokteel, Lachish, Batskat,
Botskat.
Eglon. Also,
It's again,
okay,
yeah, it's
Batskat.
Kamatspat.
Okay. Kabon, Lachmas, Kislish.
Kithlish.
Yeah, Kislish. Yeah. Gederoth, Bet Dagan, Dagon, Naamah, Makedah. 16 towns with their villages. Livna, Ether, Ashan, Yiftach, Ashna, Netziv, Keilah, Achziv, and Maresha. 9
Maosha.
towns.
If
with
you're
their-
having this much trouble, can you imagine what this would be like if I read it?
Yeah, there's so many. Yeah. Oh, Moresha. Moresha.
No, no, it's Maresha.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
okay.
yeah.
Maresha, 9 towns with their villages. Ekron, with its dependencies.
It's not that hard. Libnah, Ether, Ashan, Iptha, Ashna, Nezbib, Keilah, Akshib, and Marishah.
Well, I'm having to go from like I'm reading the English and the Hebrew at the same time. So yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Ekron with
Yeah,
its
I was
dependencies
just
and
going off the
villages.
English, so.
Yeah.
I am
From
so
Ekron.
glad I'm not reading this chapter. This is awful.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
I
I was
think
gonna
so
go.
is Tomer.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, I would love to read it actually.
From Ekron westward, all the towns in the vicinity of Ashdod with their villages. Ashdod, its dependencies and its villages. Gaza, its dependencies and its villages, all the way to the Wadi of Egypt and the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. And in the hill country, Shamir, Yatir, and Socho, Dana, Kiryaf Sana, which is Devir, Anav, Eshtemoh, Anim, Goshen, Cholon, and Gilo, 11 towns with their villages, Arav, Duma, Eshan, Yanum, Bet Tapuach, Afekah, Humta, Kiryat Arba, which is Hebron, and Tzior, 9 towns with their villages. Maon, Carmel, Ziph, and Yuta, Yisrael, Yakdaam, Zonoach, Kayin, Giv'ah, and Timnah, 10 towns with their villages. Halhul, Bet Sur, Gedor, Ma'arot, Bet Anoth, Eltakon, and Eltakon, 6 towns with their villages. Kiryat Baal, which is Kiryat Yearim, and Rabbah, 2 towns with their villages. In the wilderness, Bet Arava, Midin, and Sechacha. Oh, that's a hard one. Nishban, Ir Hamelech, or the city of salt, and Ein Gedi, which is 6 towns with their villages. But the Judahites could not dispossess the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, so the Judahites dwell with the Jebusites in Jerusalem to this day. Yeah. That's it.
Interesting, because in the Deuteronomistic narratives, I believe it's David who takes Jerusalem and thus dispossesses the Jebusites.
Well,
So
there is a similar statement in what was it, Judges 121, but it states that it's the Benjaminites who stay there, not the Judites.
okay.
Yeah,
Still.
yeah.
And I have a comment on this I'll get to. So my commentary, first on verse 28 on Biziothea. The Septuagint has Beersheba and her villages, reading Benotea instead, and this is supported by Nehemiah 11:27. Modern commentators generally see MT as a corruption of the original Hebrew Benotea. And on verse 32, the 29 towns. When counting the list, we have 36 towns, but Rashi Kimchen Abavanel counted 38 towns, which I think Ditrani was like, how did they get there? So
Yeah. Sometimes you can combine 2 place names together to make a composite name. Yeah.
Yeah, so Septuagint has 30 towns in the list, but verse 32 there states 29 towns. Still the same. Traditional commentators wrote that 7 towns, or 9, depending on who you ask, were taken by Simeon from the portion of Judah. Abravanel wrote that there were 29 towns, and the additional 9 were unwalled villages which were on the border of the towns mentioned previously. Nelson, in his reconstructed text, has 33 towns, and suggested removing 4 compound toponyms with Chatzor and Chatzar and Klozharov to achieve 29 cities. Dozeman writes that the discrepancies of MT and Septuagint suggests literary development in both textual traditions. Butler notes Howard's opinion that either, quote, some locales listed were not considered substantial enough settlements to have merited inclusion in the running total, or an early copying error may account for the discrepancy.
Isn't there an idea that like the 9 is like 9 towns extra, and those are the same 9 towns? Or am I incorrect there?
I just find it ironic that, people will object to To scholarship, as P-Town did, and oh, how dare you look at all these scholars. But any perusal of the text shows that there's multiple sources and various degrees of reliability at the very least for all of this. Like, if you're not going to look at it with scholarly eyes, you're missing huge parts of what's actually being said here. And if you want to do that, that's your business. But don't criticize other people for actually wanting to learn something.
Yeah, it looks like Simeon got more like 15 towns from the same list, so yeah, it doesn't really fix the issue with the numbering not matching.
About verse 36. On the 14 towns, when counting the list, we have 15 towns. Rashi proposed that Tapuach and Einam are the same town, while Kimchi proposed that Gedera and Gederotaim are the same town. Septuagint has farmsteads instead of Gederotaim. While Butler prefers the Septuagint reading, Nelson writes that Septuagint may be an interpretive translation based on the same text as MT, and Dozeman keeps it as Gederotaim.
Gotta love it.
Got another comment from Trevor and Wright, who says, is it possible that the book of Joshua was meant to convey a cultural connection, or was there always a warlike mindset rooted in their traditions in connecting to Yahweh and his people?
I mean, Yahweh was a war god, at least at one point, I believe originally. So
yeah, War and Storm, yeah.
War and Storm, yeah. So it's not like the Yahwist cult would have always been focused on war. The Israelite people worshipped a variety of gods that had a variety of, applications. But yeah, the connection to Yahweh was always one of violence and conquest.
I mean, if this is post-exilic, then the tribal boundaries and which cities belong to which tribe would have been irrelevant from like a conquest perspective. So this probably is mostly like cultural etiology, like
but it would
this is
have a
what
motivating factor for the reclamation and who goes where, and feeling like you're returning to something
Yeah.
ancestral and all of that. So it is a motivation factor there, even if it isn't, they
Right.
aren't
The tribal
conquering it this
distinction
time.
isn't important, but the whole land as a whole would have been.
Mhm.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And giving people the narrative of you're returning to this area that your ancestors got in this circumstance and that story. And it religion gives people stories that bind and motivate them, not always with the best results.
I haven't included it in my commentary, but I've noticed on verse 49 about Kiryat Sana. So it seems that the Septuagint and the Peshitta render it as Kiryat Sefer. And I have a comment by Dozeman. Where is it? And he writes, it doesn't want to reload. Here we go. The Hebrew Kiryat Sana occurs once as a city in the highland of Judah, 49. H.M. Orlinsky argues that Kiryat Sana is unknown and immensely empty to Kiryat Sefer, following the Septuagint. Kiryat Sana is identified with Debir.
Yeah, makes sense.
Some suggest that this is a gloss like Noth, and incorrectly glossed as Debir. Against MT, it could be argued that Kiryat Sana is a corruption caused by the preceding name Dana.
That's possible.
Now, on verse 59, 6 towns, Septuagint lists 11 towns in verses 58 to 59. Butler and Nelson prefer Septuagint and write that the MT omission is a result of homo euteleuton. Dozeman, however, notes Margulis's opinion that the corruptions defy emendation.
Wait, so 59? I mean, in the Hebrew Bible, it seems that the verse 59 says 6 towns, which is correct because it goes.
It includes
just 2 verses.
It includes more towns. The Septuagint.
I see. The Septuagint includes more. Okay.
Yeah. It has Theko and Ephratha. This is Bethlehem. and Fago, and Aitan, and Kolon, and Tatam, and
Oh.
Eobos, and Karem, and Galem, and Thether, and Manoko, 11 cities and their villages.
Ah.
Yeah.
So
Um,
is the standard Christian Bible include that or not?
I don't think it does.
That's interesting.
Okay, sorry. Which verse exactly is this again? Let me go back.
Yeah. I mean, the Septuagint there has like it mentions
verse
the 6 cities, but
57,
it also
which ends
includes
in 10 towns.
I mean, it may depend on the translation, because obviously source, different translations will source from the Septuagint or the Masoretic text according to what they think is more reliable, whoever's doing the translation. But
yeah, it's an addition of the Septuagint, just to make sure. So my final comment on verse 63: to this day the Jebusites live there with the people of Judah. Dozeman writes that this statement is puzzling, since Jerusalem was removed from the territory of Judah in the description of the northern border in verse 8. The author, however, concludes the chapter by identifying the residents of Jerusalem as the people of Judah, not Benjamin, and by attributing the current pollution of Jerusalem to the people of Judah who continue to live there. He further writes, the judgment on Judeans and on Jerusalem is aiming at Judges 121, where a similar statement is made about Benjamin. Quote, but the Benjaminites did not drive out the Jebusites who live in Jerusalem. So the Jebusites have lived in Jerusalem among the Benjaminites to this day. End quote. The two texts are not identical, but they are clearly related, with interpreters debating the direction of the inner biblical dependency. U. Becker interprets verse 63 as a reinterpretation of Judges 121. Rake reverses the inner biblical relationship, while Auld interprets the Septuagint version of verse 63 as the parent text for the MT of both verse 63 and Judges 121. What emerges from comparison, however, is the contrast between the pro-Judean version in Judges 1, in which Judah successfully conquers Jerusalem in Judges 1:8, while Benjamin fails to purge the cities of the Jebusites, Judges 1:21, and the anti-Judean version in verse 63, in which it is Judah who fails to purge Jerusalem of Jebusites.
Yeah, so the inclusion here of and this is a very common theme throughout the Deuteronomistic history. The historian tries to explain the presence of non-Israelites in the land, and this happens not just here for the Jebusites, but it happens for other groups as well. And the thing is, once we do get to some of these accounts, we've been over a couple of them, but there will be more as we go on. And we will notice that, yeah, just like this, there will be discrepancies. So, like the contradiction between this verse and the one in Judges, both of them, while of course having a different story, they both explain why there are non-Israelites in the land. So the question, of course, why are they leaving these things in? There are a couple possibilities. So I'd like to read out something from the time, place, and purpose of the Deuteronomistic history, the evidence of until this day, from Jeffrey Gagan. One reason may be that the Deuteronomist was able to reconcile many of these conflicting accounts in his own mind. For example, he likely believed that the notices blaming both Judah and Benjamin for the Jebusite presence in Jerusalem were equally true, since Jerusalem lies near the Judite-Benjamite border, and during the historian's time, Benjamin was considered part of the kingdom of Judah. Thus, the Deuteronomistic historian's confirmation of the Jebusite presence in Jerusalem with reference to the culpability of both Judah and Benjamin made perfect sense in light of his own historical circumstances. Another reason of his willingness to incorporate competing accounts into his history may have been his unwillingness to discount any received tradition. In this way, Herodotus and the Deuteronomistic historian once again come out of the same historical mold. Herodotus similarly provides more than one account for the origin of an object or institution when he has them. Again, the difference is that while Herodotus will express his opinion about the reliability of an account, the Deuteronomistic historian does not pass judgment on his sources, at least not directly. Despite these differences, DTR's, and that's just the Deuteronomistic historian, DTR's use of until this day is, to quote Van Setters, quote, a historiographic convention, and provides further evidence for DTR's historical aims when compiling Israel's traditions. But there is another possibility, right, which Tomer mentioned, the whole, like, is this kind of like a meditation thing on it? But yeah, those are some other possibilities as well.
Yeah. So when it says to this day, right, you would think it's referring to when it was written. But if this seems to be post-exilic, and it wouldn't have been. I mean, Jerusalem would have been a Judahite city for a few centuries, no? Before the exile.
Well, I mean, it wasn't. Like I said, I'm not too sure about the allotment after the exile, but they did return to the land, and they did, start rebuilding the temple. So, well, I'm not
Even
too
if this
sure
was
on the tribes.
compiled post-exilic, they might have had some pre-exilic sources.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like, or they're trying to place themselves further back in time, like.
Yeah, people love doing that. So the man, I totally forgot what I was going to say.
Sorry.
Yeah, totally forgot. Totally just fell out of my brain. It's too early for this shit.
You need more coffee.
I can't drink coffee.
Too young to have a senior moment.
Yeah, I can't drink coffee anymore because it like fucks with my heart. So like I can't do that.
Oh,
yeah, it's a bummer.
Oh.
Yeah,
okay, well we were talking about if this is post-exilic and why is Benjamin and Judah, but in the narrative put forward by the Deuteronomistic historians, who, like, I think, obviously parts of this are post-exilic, but the Deuteronomistic histories would have, at least initially, the core of it been composed back in the days of Josiah. In the narrative where there was a united kingdom that then divided in the days of Solomon's son, Rehoboam, and Jeroboam took the northern. It was 10 tribes that broke off for the northern kingdom of Israel, with Judah remaining faithful to David and Benjamin also throwing her lot in with Judah. So the binding of those two together into sort of, one kingdom is something that's a part of that history. And honestly, I don't know how, like, I don't even think there necessarily was ever a united kingdom,
right,
but...
Oh, I know there was. I've been there.
Okay. All right. All right.
On what? Astro protection and weed?
No, I do remember what I was going to say.
We're not as united
Either way, the people
like to be.
would have been, when they came back, they would have all been living together, but they still would have had those proclamations about, like, for example, the dynastic, you still have the dynastic promise. You still have the idea of these, the idea of these allotments. You still have to somehow, like, explain these people being there if you are writing from a position of, because remember, this was probably the group that wrote this over time would have probably been based in Jerusalem initially. So it is a very Judah focused group. So they did have their own, they probably had some of their own territories beforehand, right? But the reason for this weird kind of, how do I want to put, I don't know if you want to say nationalism or exceptionalism, but the reason for that is because during the Assyrian invasion, people from the north moved into the south. And that's where we get like a whole bunch of building projects starting in the southern region. So they did want to differentiate themselves from these other people while still acknowledging that they have this close relationship.
And it's interesting that there were so many different tribes, and basically you're backlogging this tradition that says this tribe is part of our in-group, but that tribe isn't. And for the post-exilic, it's about the people who have been taken into captivity and coming back, often finding ways to exclude people who were originally part of their group before the exile and the 70 years and the coming back. And so it's very, it has that nasty tang of
It's very insular.
Yeah, nationalism,
Very insular.
exceptionalism. It's just racism. It's a new, different. It's very convoluted.
It's some kind of ism.
It's nasty bigotry and it's bullshit.
More classism.
Okay, I've got a couple more comments to read. First, I want to deal with something in the chat. Somebody asked me, what do I think of Freemasonry? Well, there is no such thing as Freemasonry. You have to pay for all your stonework. And then Eric Wander says, the long list shows how extensive and varied Judah was, incorporating both the rich plain and dry wilderness. There is a beautiful map showing all these towns and cities.
So I feel like I may
some of them,
because my guess is that a lot of these we don't actually know.
Yeah.
But so I did miss it. I was actually upstairs just looking for this book. I was like, why isn't this here? This should be here. So I had to go grab it. But I probably missed Tomer saying it, but like the lands that were of the Philistines, right? Like that would have been like, that might have been a later addition too. But it is hard to say, right? Because it does kind of stand apart from the pattern that they're having. And I think this list itself actually contains that kind of pattern, right? That kind of this weird pattern of importance, right? So the most important at the top, least important at the bottom. So it does kind of break off from that pattern, but like obviously like the land there, depending on where you were, it was very dynamic. People living in like on the hillside, people living in these plains, and each of them had their own agricultural settings, and it is pretty interesting once you get into the archaeology of that all.
Yeah. Oh yeah. One thing I wanted to mention, that like we had the border of Judah mentioned first, and it went all the way from the Dead Sea to the west coast, to the Mediterranean Sea, and which is the Philistine area. And then when it talks about the clans and the specific cities, it doesn't mention any cities within Philistia. I don't know how you pronounce it. The Philistine city-states. Yeah. And so you can actually see like on a map, like, okay, if you follow the border, it goes, okay, and then it goes to Beersheba, then it goes to Timnah and Ekron. But Ekron is not one of the cities that are, given where they actually live, in the bit where it talks about the different regions and which cities belong to them.
Yeah,
like
and they
Ekron
definitely would not, at
mentioned.
the time of Joshua, they definitely would not have conquered that place.
Yeah.
It was still very much active. Like the lands
Yeah.
of the Philistines, of the Phoenicians, it was still very much active.
All the way through Judges, they're a thing.
Yeah, so it's interesting that the border doesn't match where they actually lived. Where they actually lived would have been in the south, maybe in the desert regions in certain places, but most of the towns would have been in like the hill country, and then we have a few places like En Gedi and what else, Sachacha or whatever, like some places on the Dead Sea, and that's about it. Like, but the borders given at the beginning were like much more expansive.
I actually find it interesting. I told you guys I have the old Schofield Bible, the original Schofield Bible, which has, the evangelical commentary, not scholarly, but it's an important source of a lot of the thinking that has infested the area of the Americas that is going super fascist. So, that's good to know. But they had absolutely no problem making up maps. I can't really show you in here. With all the, according to whatever's in this book, and just, trying to incorporate it with the
there's enough places that we know.
And there's enough places that they're willing to totally speculate and just insert whatever sounds like it makes sense based on their reading of the text. So there are definitely some real places there that we know existed, and some that can't reasonably be identified so far along. But that has never stopped believers from coming up with their own version based on it must be true, therefore this is what it means.
Got another comment from Eric Wander. who says, ending the chapter in a failure is an important counterpoint to the claims of sweeping victory that we have met in Joshua 1 through 12, especially 11 and 12.
That's true.
Fair point.
Okay. And then Damian McClagan asks, what kind of lizard noodle is RN currently holding? This is a Dumeral's boa from the island of Madagascar. Which reminds me, Lilith, you mentioned a name, what was it, Rehoboam?
Rehoboam. Yeah.
Pronounced like Rehoboam or something like that.
Rehoboam.
Rehoboam.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So there are.
Never mind then.
Yeah, the more interesting one is Jeroboam when we get there.
Okay.
Yeah, Rehoboam is
Yale.
just a spoiled brat.
Yeah,
who
he's just
has
a
the
counterpart.
temper
He's just
tantrum.
the boring counterpart.
Yeah, he's just the little man baby prince going, it's mine, it's mine, give it, it's mine.
So it's Joffrey.
Yes, actually, very much.
Wasn't that-
Possibly slightly less incest in the crazy, but you know.
Okay. All right. And Tomer, your commentary?
Yeah, I'm done.
You're done? Okay.
Yeah.
So should
Okay.
I
Are we-
read
We're moving
16
on
as
to
well?
16 then?
Yes, it's 10
Okay.
verses.
All right. 10
all right,
verses.
and then-
All right.
The allotment of the Josephites, like that name, Josephites, went on from the Jordan by Jericho, east of the waters of Jericho, into the wilderness, going up from Jericho into the hill country to Bethel. And then going from Bethel to Luz, it passes along Ataroth, the territory of the Archites. Then it goes down westwards to the territory of the Japhletites, as far as the territory of Lower Beth Horon, and then to Gezer, and it ends at the sea. The Josephites, Manasseh, and Ephraim received their inheritance. The territory of the Ephraimites by their families was as follows. The boundary of their inheritance on the east was Ataroth Adar, as far as Upper Beth Horon, and the boundary goes from there to the sea. To the north, it is Mikthamath.
Michmethat.
Meth addict. What? Meth.
Yeah. You're probably
Mitch-
better off with
Mitch Meth-
Mikmethath.
Yes, Mitch Methath. And then on
Yeah,
the east boundary makes a turn toward Tanath, Shiloh, and I guess that's Shiloh, and passes
Shiloh.
along. we got a street
Yeah.
called Shiloh right down the street from my house. Tanath, Shiloh, and passes along beyond to the east of Janoah. Then it goes down from Janoah to Ataroth and Nera and touches Jericho, ending in the Jordan. From Tapua, the boundary goes westwards to the Wadi Kanah and ends at the sea. Such is the inheritance of the tribe of the Ephraimites by their families, together with the towns that were set apart from the Ephraimites within the inheritance of the Manassites, all those towns with their villages. They did not, however, drive out the Canaanites who lived in Gezer, for the Canaanites have lived within Ephraim to this day, but have never been made to do forced labor.
Never?
No,
Yeah,
they
that would
had
seem-
to.
Does it
That-
say they
that's the-
never did forced labor, or they did have to do
They
forced
did.
labor?
Oh,
They
okay.
had
I'm
to do
sorry.
forced labor.
You're
Okay.
right. You're right. Ephraim to this day, but have been made to do forced labor. Just the way that was phrased, it looked like there should
Yeah.
have been a never in there. My mind just
Yeah.
put a never in there.
Yeah, so this is one of the ways that they explain, like, people living in the land but also being subservient. We see this for a few tribes.
Yeah, there's always an
Interesting.
excuse for why. I know we didn't genocide them all, but we enslaved them. And that's just as good in this instance because special exemption story.
Well, it's not as good because God wants you to kill them and not to give them.
Okay, I'll start. On verses 1 to 3, Butler notes that the allotment doesn't go to a tribe, but rather to the sons of Joseph. He writes that this is a careful formulation, seeking to maintain both the tradition that Joseph was the original son of Jacob, and the tradition that the tribe of Joseph had been divided into two parts, named after his two sons. Dozeman notes that Wellhausen viewed these verses as part of J.E. literature, but Stoyanagel viewed it as part of the priestly source, and that the similarity between verses 1 to 3 and 5 to 6 suggests interdependent composition and not separate sources. On verse 4, Nelson comments, "It is striking that the sequence given in verse 4 is first Manasseh and then Ephraim. This, along with the remark about Manasseh's firstborn status in 17:1, has sometimes been taken as evidence that this text originally described Manasseh's inheritance first, in the sequence 16 verses 1 through 4, 17 1 through 13, and 16 5 through 10, and then was subsequently reversed into its present arrangement. The existing order seems to reflect the traditional relationship of these brother tribes, quote unquote, narrated in Genesis 48. It may also be a result of Ephraim's greater political importance and proximity to Judah." Now,
Yeah, that sounds very much like what we've observed all the way through, particularly in Genesis, where there's, a heritage of squabbling over hierarchy. And they're saying, oh, well, yes, you were the firstborn, but the leadership was given to the secondborn because the arms were crossed at blessing, or the, string was crossed at birth, or whatever.
now I've included some identification of certain place names given in these verses. So we start with verse 5, "From Ataroth Adar in the east to Upper Beth Horon. Butler identified Ataroth Adar as Tel El Simadi and Upper Beth Horon as Beit Ur El Foka. Dozeman writes that the phrase most likely describes the southernmost region of Ephraim, and that the two locations may also be a section of the southern border. Septuagint has Ataroth Orek instead of Ataroth Adar, which means Ataroth of the Arakites, a reading which Ahituv supports. On verse 6, Mikmethat, Hebrew Michmetat, Ahituv writes that it is unclear if Michmetat is a name of a settlement, a mountain, or a valley east of Shechem. If it is a town, it is unidentified. If it is a mountain, it could refer to Jebel el Kabir east of Shechem. If it is a valley, it could be identified as Sahel Machne, south of Shechem. Butler and Dozeman prefer to identify it with Jebel el Kabir, while Galil identified it as Sahel Askal. On Ta'anath Shiloh, modern commentators identify it as Tana el Foka, 9 kilometers southeast of Ort Shechem. Dozeman notes that the opinion of Nadav Naaman, who adds that Ta'anath Shiloh may designate a sacred tree on the boundary near the banks of the Wadi Tirze, reflecting the root meaning of Te'ena as fig tree. Septuagint renders this place as two locations, Thenasa and Selesa. On Janoah, that's at least the English reading, in Hebrew it's Yanocha. Modern commentators identify it with Khirbet Yanon, located 9.5 kilometers southeast of Old Shechem. And on verse 7, Na'ara, Ahituv writes that Na'ara is the most eastern settlement in the Ephraimite territory, according to 1 Chronicles 7:28. But its identification is uncertain. He notes that according to Eusebius and some Midrashic sources, Na'ara was a Jewish village. From this, it is likely that Na'ara is located at Tel El Jisr, 3 kilometers northwest of Tel As-Sultan. Butler identified it as Khirbet El Mifgir, and Galil and Nelson identified it at Khirbet El Auja El Foka.
Yeah. But by the way, what's the difference between a Tel and a Khirbet when it comes to these sort of archaeological sites? Do you know?
I think Khirbet means ruin,
Yeah.
and Tel
But
means like
a mound.
a mound, I guess.
Yeah. But but all of these places that you mentioned, these are all archaeological sites, right?
Yes, these are
Or-
archaeological.
Yeah.
I assume
Just
so.
wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's just the difference between a mound and like a walled city, maybe.
Perhaps.
Mm.
On verse 9, Butler argues that the border irregularities described in this verse point to the early date and historical soundness of the border descriptions. While he notes Knauf's opinion that the verse shows the impossibility of drawing any border at all, he writes, quote, "One sees the text's irregularities as a proof of its origin in real life rather than in scribal invention," end quote. Dozeman, however, notes Stoyanag's view that the listing of the unconquered cities in Joshua, verse 9 and 17, 11 to 13, is an addition based on the similar account in Judges 1, verses 27 to 29. He also notes Noth's opinion that the mixing of cities between Ephraim and Manasseh, verse 9 and 79, indicated the later creation of two tribal territories, as compared to the one unified territory of Joseph in the source document. And finally, on verse 10, it's a bit long, but yeah, this verse is repeated with slight variation in Judges 1:29. Ahituv and Galil note that Gezer was incorporated into Israel during Solomon's reign, according to 1 Kings 9:12 and 9:16. Butler writes that this points to progress beyond the point of Joshua 15:63, where the Jebusites simply dwell in the land. And Nelson comments, readers of the book of Joshua in its final form, for whom possession of the land was precarious, would have found the theme of Israel's incomplete conquest significant. Even in the foundational period, they are told, Israel's land tenure remained incomplete. Readers should not fear that their only partial control of the land of promise or the troubling presence of alien populations might void Yahweh's ancient promises or negate their future as Yahweh's people in the land. Even Joshua had to concede some political realities, but only in the short term. Imposed forced labor in verse 10, Israel's increased strength in 1713, and the forecast that Israel would eventually dispossess the Canaanites, 1718, point readers beyond their present ambiguous situation to faith in the ultimate success of Yahweh's people. And the Septuagint there has a different reading. It reads, and Ephraim did not destroy the Canaanite living in Gezer, and the Canaanite lived in Ephraim until this day, until Pharaoh, king of Egypt, went up and took it, and he burned it with fire, and they massacred the Canaanites and the Perizzites and those living in Gezer, and Pharaoh gave it as a dowry to his daughter. And Dozeman comments, the
Wow.
emphasis of the MT on the present state of pollution from the Canaanites in Gezer is shifted to the past in the Septuagint by including an inner biblical interpretation of 1 Kings 9:16. It recounts the Egyptian conquest of Gezer and the gift of the city to Solomon by Pharaoh. A similar contrast in point of view is evident in the evaluation of the Jebusites in Jerusalem, 1563, and in the curse on rebuilding Jericho, 626. The positive portrayal of Pharaoh in the Septuagint may also reflect an idealization of Egypt evident in the Septuagint version of the circumcision story, 5:2-12.
Well, Septuagint was made in Egypt, wasn't it?
Alexandria.
Alexandria.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, during the Greek period, but yes.
Ah.
I have
No,
to say,
it would have been written during a long period of time, like
Well-
different books being translated at different points, but for the most part, yeah.
well, unless you believe the 70 elders in separate rooms stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I have to say, this is something that that we really need to pay attention to right now in history as well as in past history. This way of devaluing human beings and saying we are entitled to this land, and not only entitled to it, but commanded to obliterate the people who came before. This is a horrible thing. And it's not just something of, a justification of that time, which granted was quite brutal. And it's not like the Israelites were any worse than anyone else going at the time. I'm not saying that, but putting the idea that you are divinely mandated to destroy these people from the face of the earth is just, it's so evil. And it's in direct violation of what we recognize now to be human rights, the rights of indigenous populations. And thanks to Christianity's weird habit of claiming the promises given to Jews as then applicable to whatever sect of Christians are going around, this attitude that was laid out here and that we've been going over for weeks now was absolutely used as a justification for every group who wanted to call themselves chosen people. For in South Africa, for the the white people in South Africa claiming the land and imposing the manifest destiny in America and North America and the cleansing out of indigenous peoples. This is something that people have used, and not just used in a purely, because I think we tend to imagine it's purely mercenary, and no doubt for some people, at least in leadership, it is, but it's not for the bulk of the people affected by these ideas. It's that when you're young, you're taught that the Bible is sacred and you have to agree with it. And then you take these ideas from it and apply it how you want, and you have this great latent force of people feeling obligated to affirm whatever you're able to tie to these scriptures, because it is the sacred word and we must affirm the sacred word. And it can lead by gradations to horrific atrocities, and has for thousands of years. And it's very unfortunate and very sad that because of the way religion has evolved, this text from a granted somewhat barbaric time has continued to perpetrate atrocities through people.
Yeah, and they do. It's interesting. They are ignoring the sort of context of this whole thing that we're talking about, right? So there's like these mythical conquerings of land, and then it's like, and then these people, they weren't conquered, they're still here to this day, which seems to imply like, you had your chance and you've lost it, so you won't be able to do it again.
But in the
And yet they're like,
commentary that Tomer had, they're like, they're here, but we've still managed to enslave them, and we'll get rid of them someday.
That's what the text says.
And that we'll get rid of them someday. Like that's a call to later generations to feel we are going to fulfill this by genociding whoever we've decided represents this group. And sometimes literally possible descendants of that group, and sometimes just, whoever it is you've decided you want to get rid of for your own reasons. But it's leaving it unfulfilled is almost worse in the effect it has on human behavior long term.
Are we ready to move on to the next chapter?
Yeah. I can read it if you want.
Okay.
And
I was going to read it.
Sorry.
But if you really want to.
I mean, you already read the previous one.
I mean, yeah. I mean, cause like I'm just curious about like verse 3. Now Zolola Fehad. Go ahead.
I mean, we've already noted her in numbers. So.
Okay. I know. Maybe to fix this fight, I'll just read it. All right. And this is the portion that fell by lot to the tribe of Manasseh, for he was Joseph's firstborn. Since Machir, the firstborn of Manasseh and the father of Gilead, was a valiant warrior, Gilead and Bashan were assigned to him. And now assignments were made to the remaining Manassites by their clans, the descendants of Abiezer, Chelek, Asriel, Shechem, Hefer, and Shemidah. Those were the male descendants of Manasseh, son of Joseph, by their clans. Now, Zelophehad, son of Hefer, son of Gilead, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, had no sons, but only daughters. The names of his daughters were Machlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. They appeared before the priest Eleazar, Joshua, son of Nun, and the chieftain, saying, God commanded Moses to grant us a portion among our male kinsmen. So in accordance with God's instructions, they were granted a portion among their father's kinsmen. 10 districts fell to Manasseh, apart from the lands of Gilead and Bashan, which are across the Jordan. Manasseh's daughters inherited a portion in these together with his sons, while the land of Gilead was assigned to the rest of Manasseh's descendants. The boundary of Manasseh ran from Asher to Michmetat, which lies near Shechem. The boundary continued to the right toward the inhabitants of Ein Tapuach. The region of Tapuach belonged to Manasseh, but Tapuach on the border of Manasseh belonged to the Ephraimites. Then the boundary descended to the Wadi Kana. Those towns to the south of the Wadi belonged to Ephraim as an enclave among the towns of Manasseh. The boundary of Manasseh lay north of the Wadi and ran on to the sea. What lay to the south belonged to Ephraim, and what lay to the north belonged to Manasseh, with the sea as its boundary. This was contiguous with Asher on the north and with Issachar on the east. Within Issachar and Asher, Manasseh possessed Beth Sha'an and its dependencies, Yivleam and its dependencies, the inhabitants of Dor and its Endor,
We lost you
Tanakh
there.
and its dependencies, and the inhabitants of Megiddo.
Is Isaac glitching for other people or
Yeah,
just me?
he is. He is.
Yeah,
But
Isaac is
you're
glitching.
glitched there, Isaac.
Oh, can you not hear me at all?
It's kind of weird
we
that
heard- no,
it
we-
happened just after he named Endor. That's Star Wars, Isaac. That's not the Bible.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear
now
you.
You're, now you're back.
Yeah.
Glitch there for a minute.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, so that was only for a few seconds.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, Endor, the inhabitants of Tanakh and its dependencies, and the inhabitants of Megiddo and its dependencies. These constituted 3 regions. The Manassites could not dispossess the inhabitants of these towns, and the Canaanites stubbornly remained in this region. When the Israelites became stronger, they imposed tribute on the Canaanites, but they did not dispossess them. The Josephites complained to Joshua, saying, "Why have you assigned us our portion a single allotment and a single district, seeing that we are a numerous people, whom God has blessed so greatly? If you are a numerous people," Joshua answered them, "go up to the forest country and clear an area for yourselves there, in the territory of the Perizzites and the Rephaim, seeing that you are cramped in the hill country of Ephraim." "The hill country is not enough for us," the Josephites replied, "and all the Canaanites who live in the valley area have iron chariots, both those in Bet Shan and its dependencies and those in the valley of Yisrael." But Joshua declared to the house of Joseph, to Ephraim and Manasseh, "You are indeed a numerous people, possessed of great strength. You shall not have one allotment only. The hill country shall be yours as well. True, it is forest land, but you will clear it and possess it to its furthest limits. And you shall also dispossess the Canaanites, even though they have iron chariots, and even though they are strong."
But iron chariots are Jehovah's one weakness. Incidentally, iron and salt shavings are used. Iron shavings and salt are often used to ward off evil. So
Yes, chariots of fire. I mean, obviously the iron chariots win.
Yeah, that was just to be clear, that was the end of 17, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the one thing I was really wondering about is the usage of Joseph here. So in the past couple chapters, we've seen a few mentions of Joseph, right? If you guys remember, I might make a video about this at some point. I did like a short on it, but I should do an actual video. So the Joseph story from there's a really good book on this. It's an anthology. The first like couple chapters are all about like the Hebrews, so it'd definitely be more helpful to know Hebrew in that case. But the rest of it is very much understandable to just English speakers. So it's called The Joseph Story Between Egypt and Israel. It was published not even that long ago. Like it's a very recent publication, like maybe 10 years ago or so. That does count as very recent, by the way.
It's by Israel Finkelstein. Is
Uh,
it? Or is it?
no,
Oh, is it edited?
Joseph-
No, it's edited. Sorry, I just saw that there was a article by Finkelstein, which is called the Joseph Story Between Egypt and Israel. So I assumed that this was this.
Right. No, this one was edited by Conrad Schmidt, Thomas Romer, and some guy called Mueller. I forget his first name.
Finkelstein did edit the Archaeology and Bible series, so I wasn't far off.
So the argument that's essentially made is that the Joseph story was written in maybe the late Persian or early Hellenistic period, and it was kind of added to the text to be to kind of be the bridge between Genesis and Exodus. And there's a lot of internal stuff in the Joseph story which is far closer to those kind of later court tales than to the rest of the text itself. That's why, like, when we read over the Joseph story, it seemed to be like its own little story, right? It was like a continuous thing. It didn't seem like broken up or anything.
Yeah, it was an actual narrative,
right? Yeah,
like an Esther or what have you, and
actually, it was exactly
compared
like an
them.
Esther.
You compared it
was
to
like,
Esther and Daniel, yeah.
yeah, because those were the ones where you have like, yeah, God working behind the scenes kind of thing, but very rarely actually mentioned or important to the story. So it is much closer to those than the rest of Genesis. So but then of course we're left with the idea of like, okay, so if the Joseph story was later inclusion, why do we have stuff like references to like the house of Joseph or the sons of Joseph, stuff like that, right? So I took a look into what so this is the paper in this anthology that I'm pulling this from was written by Lauren Monroe. She wrote a very good book on the Josianic reforms, if anyone's interested in that. So on this section, because usually we have like the house of Joseph, right? And in this one we have the sons of Joseph, right? Benai Yosef.
Let's see.
And 14.
Yes, 14. Bnei Yosef. Bnei Yosef.
Okay. So yeah, reference to Ephraim and Manasseh in verse 17 is likely to be a gloss in the Masoretic text intended to mitigate the unusual and repeated identification of the house of Joseph as a great or mighty people, a designation that is unexpected in reference to a single named group in Joshua's schematic allotment of tribal territories, by explaining that by house of Joseph, the authors really mean Ephraim and Manasseh. The glossator, in effect, harmonizes the house of Joseph to the sons of Joseph mentioned earlier in the passage, resolving an inconsistency in the text and forging an equivalency that is not, in fact, supported by the distribution of references to house of Joseph elsewhere in the biblical corpus.
I did point out, especially at the beginning of the Joseph tale, where you have the bit where he's thrown in the cistern and sold to the, two different groups, that there did seem to be at least some sourcing of earlier material in the Joseph tale in a way that's not obvious in something like Esther, where you have, an obvious interweaving of, the story has two different tribes named as the ones that bought him, and then later traditions harmonized. I guess I kind of wonder about how old the Joseph tradition might have been, and if there was something prior to the actual writing of that tale that was later included in Genesis.
Right.
And
yeah,
how much of that, because the Joseph name is very different from the other names. It sort of sounds and feels very distinct from the rest of the tribal names. But yeah, I don't know. It's kind of one of those things we can only hypothesize on.
Yeah. This character of Joseph as being like an ancient, forefather, right? May have been totally a thing. In the same way we get like House of David stuff, but the actual story itself is still
a later composition, and possibly with some source materials and that they didn't want to fudge with. It's kind of interesting. If they just straight up invented everything, it would harmonize much better, but they don't feel like they can be the one that cuts out this bit of the sacred text forever. So they keep, stitching together.
You want to read comments, Aaron?
All right. Eric Wander says, Joseph's sense of constriction is related to their inability to confront the Canaanites of the plain with their iron chariots, the tanks of the day. No comments about that one. Okay. Dara O'Kane says, God isn't weak to Iran when the Jews say that it does say Iran, weak to Iran when the Jews say that iron chariots, their faith was shaken because they were scared. God doesn't protect his chosen people if their faith isn't strong.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, I think he meant iron and not Iran.
Yeah, it's just a bit odd.
Yeah, I think the idea is it's not like God
autocrat.
is weak to iron. It's like when the Israelites saw the iron chariots in that one chapter, because their faith wasn't strong, God was like, I'm not going to help you.
We do the same thing here. We have
Yeah.
our Board of Education people there. On one of the meetings where I went to testify, they were admitting that they were going to teach American exceptionalism, regardless whether it's true or not. But they were going to teach it because they needed students to believe that America has blessings only because we appease God, and that our country was based on a covenant between God and Moses. Even if they know that that's not true, they need to teach students that because they think that God will not protect us if our faith is not strong. It's the same kind of bullshit. You got to really, really believe it before it becomes true. You have to believe it so hard that you make it come true. And in order to do that, you need everybody believing the same thing, even if you know it's not true when you teach it to them.
And how many rivers of blood, oceans of blood have been spilled by people who were making it true?
What was that quote by the Lord of Whispers? In Game of Thrones, the truth is what we believe it to be, something like that.
Do I look like a basic bitch to you, Isaac?
Lawrence!
Do I look like I watch Game of Thrones?
You don't have to watch Game of Thrones to get the quotable bits or to know to hate Joffrey.
I feel like you do.
Let me see if I can find. I think it's the truth is what we believe it to be true, or something like that.
I've heard people say that. I'm not characters in movies, but I've heard people say that in real life. I've been criticized. If I tell somebody that they didn't really win the Publishers Clearinghouse sweepstakes, then I'm jinxing them, that they were really going to have won it until I point out the flaw in their reasoning.
Are you saying that they were going to go for it?
They don't believe it anymore because I've jinxed it and now it won't come true.
I think we all need some simple modes of thought to give our brains a break. And I just wish people would choose less harmful ones. Like, be a basic bitch and get into Game of Thrones. Just, make that your easy thinking stuff. Just do that, please. Please don't apply it to real life.
I'd advise people don't get into it. It's not worth it. I got the quote wrong. It's power resides where men believe it to be.
Now that is true.
Not the truth.
That is true. Power is power.
Okay.
Power resides where men believe it resides. Yeah.
Okay, I'll start my commentary on verse 1, and it's a bit long, so I'm sorry about that. Dozeman comments, verse 1 is a reinterpretation of the genealogy of Manasseh in Numbers 26, verses 28 to 29.
I say that a lot too. It's a bit long. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Someday someone's going to call your bluff on that one.
So it repeats the three generations of Manasseh, Machir, and Gilead. But the introduction of the motif of the lot indicates the emphasis is on territory over genealogy. The lot was for the tribe of Manasseh, quote unquote. The focus on land prompts two contrasts to Numbers. One, Gilead is identified as the eastern region along with Bashan in addition to his role as ancestor. And two, Machir is the point of focus. The focus on Machir identifies the daughters of Zelophehad with the eastern half-tribe of Manasseh in verse 3. But the territory of Machir is more expansive in Joshua than simply the eastern territory of Gilead and Bashan. During the distribution of land to the eastern half-tribe of Manasseh, the author stated that Machir, like Manasseh, consists of two half-tribes, one east of the Jordan and the other west, 13 verses 29 to 31. Nelson clarifies, quote, the expression half of the children of Machir indicates that elements of this major clan were also present west of the Jordan, end quote. And this interest in the details of Manasseh clan, is quoting Nelson again, I'll repeat that again, quote, this interest in the details of Manasseh clan structure is picked up again in 17:1-3, end quote. The interpretation of Machir in Joshua as two half-tribes means that, although the daughters of Zelophehad are members of the eastern half-tribe of Manasseh, they are entitled to land claims in the western half, where Machir also resides. This is the innovation of the author of Joshua in the reinterpretation of the first section of the genealogy of Manasseh, Numbers 26, 28, 29. The daughters of Zelophehad bridged the eastern and western halves of Manasseh. On verse 2, the sons of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. This is absent from the Septuagint. Butler writes that this may be a later specification by the tradition. Nelson takes it as an MT expansion, but notes that it is present in 4Q Joshua B. On verse
what just now I'm thinking it would be really interesting to see the usage of house of and son of, and the difference if there's a chronological difference between them, because like we have this one example so far, but I'd be interested to look into other occurrences as well, because like maybe during some point they started using sons of instead of house of for some reason. And I think
I have no doubt someone's written a paper on that.
There probably is or something. I'd have to look into that. That's pretty interesting.
I don't have access to those, so.
Now on verses 3 to 4, the matter of Zelophehad's daughters is told in Numbers 26:33 and 27 1 through 11, and chapter 36 there. Dozeman comments, the author based the demand of the daughters of Zelophehad for land in part on the past ruling of Moses in Numbers 27 verses 1 through 11, where the request for inheritance was based solely on genealogy. Moses granted the request in 27:7. The ruling focuses on genealogy, marriage, and inheritance rights, and not on the specific territory that the daughters of Zelophehad would inherit. The additional clarification that inheritance may be transferred through daughters, or if necessary, also through brothers, father's brothers, and the nearest kinsmen, underscores the emphasis on genealogy, 27 verses 8 through 11. The author of Joshua repeats the emphasis on genealogy in the daughter's statement to Joshua in verse 4, which Joshua executes, giving them, quote, an inheritance in the midst of the brothers of their father, end quote. The focus on genealogy, however, does not exhaust the intent of the author of Joshua, which is signaled by the motif of the lot, verses 1 and 2, and by the identification of the daughters of Zelophehad as 5 districts in West Manasseh, verse 5. On verses 5 through 6, Butler comments, Manasseh received 10 shares, 1 each for the clans of Manasseh except for Hefer, and 1 each for the 5 daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hefer, who appear to have inherited just as much as each of the sons of Manasseh. It is interesting that the 10 parts are set over against Gilead and Bashan, making a total of 12. Gray suggests, quote, the debate seems to concern not so much land as status in a sacred confederacy of the clans of Manasseh, perhaps the reorganization of an originally smaller confederacy at Shechem, end quote. Whatever the historical background for the present editor, the point remains the obedience of Joshua and the allotment to Manasseh. Howard notes the stress on providing inheritance, even for individuals, especially women. On verses 7 through 11, Dozeman comments, the territory of West Manasseh is both fragmentary and porous. It is sketched out from the north by Asher to the south and Tapuach of Ephraim. The remaining description emphasizes that West Manasseh is intertwined with Ephraim to the south and with Issachar and Asher to the north. Both descriptions are obscure. With regard to Ephraim, Tapuach belonged to Ephraim, whilst its surrounding land was in the possession of West Manasseh in verse 19:8. The further description of the remaining distribution of cities between the two tribes is missing, 19:9 through 10a. With regard to Issachar and Asher, none of the 7 northern cities listed as possessions of West Manasseh in 1911 appears in the original descriptions of Issachar and Asher. The literary ambiguity suggests that the aim of the author is not geographical precision. Rather, it is to link West Manasseh both to Ephraim in the south and to Issachar and Asher in the north. The geographical relationship to the neighboring tribes are different. West Manasseh is intertwined with Ephraim in making up the territory of the sons of Joseph. In contrast to this, West Manasseh penetrates the northern frontier regions of Asher and Issachar, suggesting that the full extent of its northern territory is not yet clearly defined. On verse 7, the people living
Hold on,
at
I got a
Antioch.
question.
Sorry.
Issachar. Is that where the orcs took the hobbits?
No. So on verse 7,
They're taking the hobbits to Issachar.
So on verse 7, the people living at Entapuach. Ahituv writes that the people living at Entapuach is a meaningless statement, and it is corrupted. Instead, it should read Yasib and Entapuach, and is attested by the Septuagint and the Samaria Ostracon, which hints to the existence of a settlement called Yasib. Nelson writes that MT's reading is a result of metathesis. On verse 9, Septuagint gives a different reading, quote, "And the boundaries shall go down to the ravine of Karana, southwestward by the ravine of Yariel. A terebinth tree belonging to Ephraim is in the midst of a city of Manasseh, and the boundaries of Manasseh northward are into the wadi, and the sea shall be its outlet," end quote. Butler writes that the reading terebinth tree by the Septuagint may reflect a different reading of the word ele, these, as in these towns, Hebrew arim ha'ele, reading it as Allah, cultic tree. He also notes Stoyanagel's opinion that the beginning and end of the verse in MT are incapable of being understood, explaining the problem through a series of editorial glosses. On verse 11, the third in the list is Nafoth. Hebrew Bible reads Shloshet Hanafet, literally the three of Napheth. The exact meaning of this phrase is unclear. Septuagint and Vulgate read the third part of Nafeta. 4Q Joshua B and Targum read the three districts, Hebrew Shloshet Hanafot, and is supported by Rashi, Kara, and Galil. Dozeman notes George Dahl's opinion that this was a marginal note, which was incorporated into the Masoretic text, and its purpose was to clarify that Dor was in fact Nafot Dor. Thus, his reading follows that of the NIV. The third in the list, Dor, is Napot, and also Nelson supports this reading. On verses 14 to 18, although Rashi and Kimchi wrote that the sons of Joseph refer to the Manassites, and Ibn Kaspe Ditrani wrote that it refers to Ephraim and the half-tribe of Manasseh, Gersonides wrote that this refers to both tribes, and modern commentators agree with this. Dozeman writes that the designation of Joseph as sons clarifies that Joseph is not a tribe in Joshua. He also writes, the motif of the incomplete conquest is also added to the closing exchange between Joshua and the sons of Joseph, who require more land. The addition is evident in the juxtaposition of two conflicting motifs: the need for the sons of Joseph to clear the forest in order to enlarge their land, and the command that they conquer the remaining Canaanites. In the original form of the exchange, the sons of Joseph state that they are a great people and that the single lot was too small for them. The solution is that they clear the forest. Quote, "There will not be one lot for you, for the hill country will be yours. Though it is forest, you will clear it, and its limit will be your possession." End quote. 1770 to 18a, also 1750. The addition introduces the theme of conquest. The sons of Joseph state that the lack of sufficient land is the result of the Canaanites who remain in the land and possess iron chariots. The solution of Joshua is that they will conquer the Canaanites, even though they have iron chariots. As is the case in the addition to Ephraim, 16:10, and to Manasseh, verses 11 to 13, the motif of conquest repeats material from Judges 1. In the case of the sons of Joseph, however, there is a reinterpretation in which the original focus on Judah conquering the Canaanites, Judges 1:19, is transferred to the sons of Joseph. On verse 15, in the land of the Perizzites and Raphites. This phrase is absent from the Septuagint. Nelson takes the phrase as an MT expansion, but the motif for this expansion is unclear. It could be that Rephaim originated from a dictography for hill country of Ephraim, in Hebrew Har Ephraim. Butler writes that this phrase, quote, could be a later introduction of traditional terminology. On verse 16, iron chariots, Dozeman notes that Joseph's complaint about iron chariots repeats the same problem of conquest faced by Judah in Judges 1:19. Galil writes that chariots of the Canaanites were made of wood, much like the chariots of other ancient Near Eastern kingdoms. Ahituv writes that a chariot was made solely of iron or of a different metal, and it is unknown to us. Such a chariot might have been too heavy. He and Galil suggested that the term iron chariot refers to a chariot which some of its components were made of iron. And Nelson writes, given the resources needed for construction, training, and support, the chariot as a weapon system signifies superior technological and social organization. Chariots indicate that Canaan is a more advanced culture. Perhaps the iron in question was used to strengthen the attachment between the pole and the front of the body. Robert Drews proposed scythed wheels or iron tires. Nahum 2:3 suggests shiny metal decoration. In any case, iron functions rhetorically as a symbol of invincible strength, aggression, and brutality. And finally, on verse 17, the tribes of Joseph to Ephraim and Manasseh, Septuagint reads, the sons of Joseph. Butler writes that the MT reading possibly reflects a later specification by the tradition. He notes Fritz's opinion that this is a gloss. Nelson views it as an MT expansion, but suggests a haplography by the Septuagint. That's it for my commentary.
All right.
Yeah,
Any commentary on that commentary?
Yeah, there's one last thing is like Manasseh's like, oh, we don't have enough space. We have so many people. And Joshua's like, okay, you have a lot of people, so you can use that strength of numbers to conquer more land for yourselves, you know? What are you asking me for?
Get out there and kill more people. Jeez, what are you waiting for? It's ironic that something so mind-numbingly boring can contain such insidious and everlasting evil.
Now, we did finish 17.
Yes.
Did we? Okay.
Yes.
Are we ready to move on to 18?
Yeah,
I think we got a
there
pretty
is one
good
more
question in the
comment.
chat, though.
Yeah.
Honestly,
Okay,
I just
correct.
want to ram through 18, 19 because it's not going to get interesting till 20 cities of refuge and the towns for the Levites.
Okay.
But even that is, but like, oh, I just wish.
Let me read the comment from Trevor Wright. It says, which book out of the entire Bible would you say is interesting, regardless of being a non-believer, even if it's just a particular textual point being made or your own takeaway from it?
I think there are a few that are pretty interesting. Judges, pretty solid.
Yep.
So yeah, Judges. Esther is a fun one. Jonah
Job.
is Job. Yeah, not
Ecclesiastes.
exactly. Ecclesiastes
is the only good one.
because
Ecclesiastes
it's
and
very
half of
nihilistic.
Proverbs.
I will say Deuteronomy as well. I find it
Okay,
interesting.
I don't know what Tomer's on, but
Yeah,
Esther's
Esther-
good.
Somebody told me today that Ecclesiastes in its entirety, but particularly Ecclesiastes 3, does nothing but assure us of the existence of God.
Oh, well, I
Like,
mean,
I don't think
Meaningless,
we're reading the
meaningless,
same book.
says the teacher. Everything is meaningless and a chasing after the wind. What the fuck?
yeah, exactly. Like it's the most nihilistic book, right? Because
Yeah.
it's very much like, listen. I know nothing matters, but like God, it's essentially like, everything has its
It's
time.
still good to
everything has its
work
path.
and drink and
Yeah, essentially
bang.
it is all meaningless, which is great.
Oh,
Revelation
but
is my favorite still. Revelation is awesome.
It's interesting to study what it actually meant and intended and what the genre is. It's also just interesting as a hypothetical acid trip of an apocalyptic jackass.
for
Okay.
tsunami, in Esther, it says at the end there was a command to like have a feast, and I don't know if it's in the Book of Esther, but it reference to that. There was also an idea of you should drink so much that you curse Mordecai and bless Haman.
Oh yeah,
So,
until you can't
I
tell the
think that-
difference between blessed as Mordecai and cursed as Haman.
I think that's Talmud
Yeah.
Adeloyada, and that's
I
where
appreciate
yeah,
I
okay.
appreciate that about the Feast of Purim. It's like this
Yeah.
is once a
Yes,
year.
it's
we're
not
gonna
in
get
the book.
so drunk
It's a Talmud. Yeah.
Yeah,
we
which
can't
by
even
the way,
tell what we're saying.
the calling it Purim is just so weird.
It
because,
is.
like, if you think about it, that'd be like calling Easter the day of the 30 shekels of silver. Like,
Because
it's that weird.
Purim means like what? Purge?
Lots.
Well, because it comes from
Oh.
a word meaning like a lot, I think, right?
Yes.
Right, because they
Yeah.
cast
Or
lots
3 lots,
for.
yeah.
Because in the story, Haman casts lots to figure out which month of the year and which day of the month would be the most.
Yeah. By the way,
Vicious.
Purim is 2 weeks from now.
Yes.
Oh, well,
I gotta get drunk.
Okay, Tomer, I better see you drunk off your fucking ass.
Come
Yeah,
on, what are you
I'll
gonna
try.
dress up as?
I won't. Maybe I'll
Okay.
make a surprise. I don't know.
All right. So
That's
who is
I'll
reading
see
this
Tom
next
as
chapter?
Okay.
I can
Yeah,
read.
I mean,
I
actually
Lawrence
would,
hasn't read.
but I was just gonna say I actually would, but there's a guest and a barking dog, so and I know that Arn is used to that, but yeah, it's gonna be loud in here.
Okay.
Oh gosh. Do
Who
it.
can
If
speed read?
I were to try to read,
All
I've
right.
got 4 dogs
Fine,
in the
fine.
room
So you
with
can
me.
read.
I'll give it a shot. Fine.
Yeah.
All right. Let's
Read up to 20.
Whoever's reading 18, like go up until maybe 30, 20.
I mean,
I
yeah,
I
all right.
think
I
20
guess
is
I guess
fine.
Just
through
read
20 is
all the
fine.
way through chapter 18 and 19. Just
Including 20.
barrel it.
Well, I think
I have
here-
comments.
Here's the
as
thing.
well,
I think because of because I think we're gonna be covering. Oh man, I don't know. Okay, we'll see how this goes.
Yeah, through 20, including
Yeah.
20.
Then the whole congregation of the Israelites assembled at Shiloh and set up the tent of meeting there. The land lay subdued before them. There remained among the Israelites 7 tribes whose inheritance had not yet been apportioned. So Joshua said to the Israelites, "How long will you be slack about going in and taking possession of the land that the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has given you?" I don't know, Joshua. You're kind of the general. Provide 3 men from each tribe, and I will send them out that they may begin to go throughout the land, writing a description of it with a view to their inheritances. Then come back to me. They shall divide it into 7 portions, Judah continuing in its territory on the south, and the house of Joseph in their territory on the north. You shall write a description of the land in 7 divisions, and bring the description here to me, and I will cast lots for you here before the Lord our God. The Levites have no portion among you, for the priesthood of the Lord is their heritage. And Gad and Reuben and the half-tribe of Manasseh have received their inheritance beyond the Jordan eastward, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave them. So the men started on their way, and Joshua charged those who went to write the description of the land, saying, "Go throughout the land and write a description of it, and come back to me, and I will cast lots for you here before the Lord in Shiloh." So the men went and traversed the land and set down in a book a description of it by towns and 7 divisions. Then they came back to Joshua in the camp at Shiloh, and Joshua cast lots for them in Shiloh before the Lord, and there Joshua portioned the land to the Israelites, to each portion. So here's the territory of Benjamin. The lot of the tribe of Benjamin, according to its families, came up, and the territory allotted to it fell between the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Joseph. On the north side, their boundary began at the Jordan. Then the boundary goes up to the slope of Jericho on the north, then up through the hill country westward, and it ends at the wilderness of Bethaven, which I believe means house of wickedness.
Bet Oven. Yeah, I mean House of. I guess like you could read it as House of. I think we've seen this before.
We have, yeah, much of.
Yeah, we did. Bet Oven.
From there,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
boundary passes along southward in the direction of Luz to the slope of Luz, that is Bethel. Then the boundary goes down to Ataroth Adar on the mountain that lies south of lower Beth Horon. Then the boundary goes in another direction, turning on the western side southward from the mountain that lies to the south, opposite Beth Horon, and it ends at Kiriath Baal, that is Kiriath Jearim. a town belonging to the tribe of Judah. This forms the western side. The southern side begins at the outskirts of Kiriath Jearim on the west, and the boundary comes out at the spring of the waters of Nephtoah. Then the boundary goes down to the border of the mountain that overlooks the valley of the son of Hinnom, which is at the north end of the valley of Rephaim, and then goes down the valley of Hinnom south of the slope of the Jebusites and downward to En Rogel. Then it bends in a northerly direction, going on to En Shemesh, and from there goes to Geliloth, which is opposite the ascent of Adumim. Then it goes down to the stone of Bohan, Reuben's son, and passing on to the north of the slope of Beth Araba, it goes down to the Araba. Then the boundary passes on to the north of the slope of Beth Hogla, and the boundary ends at the northern bay of the Dead Sea. At the south end of the Jordan, this is the southern border. Then, the Jordan forms its boundary on the eastern side. This is the inheritance of the tribe of Benjamin, according to its families, boundary by boundary all around.
Yeah, so pretty much all of this was already mentioned because they were, the southern boundary of Benjamin is the northern boundary of Judah. It's running from west to east instead of from east to west, like we read before. By the way, did we mention anything about the stone of Bothan, son of Reuben?
No, I don't think
so.
I don't think it's come up before.
It did in 15.
It did.
It did in 15.
Oh, it did? Okay.
Yes.
Bohan, sorry. Like,
yeah,
this is a weird place name. It's like, I think Rashi was like, oh, it could be that this is the stone of a guy called Bohan who was the son of Reuben, or it's the place called the stone of Bohan, and the person's name was
I don't think it was Rashi. I'll
Reuben.
look
It's like
up.
weird.
I'll look up into it real quick.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was Steinsaltz. I remember.
Let me see real quick. That was it appeared in 15:6. Sorry.
15th. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean Kimchi says Bohan son of Reuben. The master of the place was named Bohan son of Reuben, and the name Evan stone. Perhaps there was a large stone there to indicate the border, something like that. If I translate it correctly. I see a comment by Dozeman, who writes that the Hebrew Evan Bohan ben Reuven suggests a specific topographical location west of the Jordan River, even though the tribe of Reuben is associated with the eastern side of the Jordan. The location remains unidentified by historical geographers. The two references to the site occurs in the book of Joshua as a marker for the northern border of Judah, 15:6, and the southern border of Benjamin.
Yeah. Okay, so it's an unknown location.
Okay, so I'll start on verse 1, Shiloh. Dozeman comments, the role of Shiloh in ancient Israelite tradition is ambiguous. References to it provide a window into its function as a northern cultic center that was destroyed. The early cultic function of Shiloh is evident in its association with the house of Eli and Samuel. For example, 1 Samuel 1:3 and 9, 2:14, 4:3, 4, and 12. And the prophet Achia, for example, in 1 Kings 11:29, 12:15, 14 verses 2 and 4. While Psalms 78:60 and Jeremiah, for example, 7:12 and 14, 26, 6 and 9, describe its destruction. Shiloh is identified in Joshua with the tent of meeting and the distribution of land to 7 of the tribes, verses 1, 8, 9, 10, and 19:51. It is also the setting for the selection of the Levitical cities, 21:2, and for the dismissal of the tribes to their homes east of the Jordan, 22 verses 9 and 12.
Yeah, there's a good little section about something like this. So this is, and if anyone's wondering, so this is in Reconsidering Israel and Judah, Recent Studies on the Deuteronomistic History. This weirdly atrocious purple. for anyone that wants to look for it. So this is from a paper by Alexander Roth, Ephraimite versus
Ofe.
Deuteronomistic. Ephraimite versus Deuteronomistic.
He's an Israeli scholar.
A basic tenet of the Deuteronomistic school through all its phases is the injunction of the unification of worship. Indeed, the various versions of this law reflect the history of the Deuteronomistic school. The first Deuteronomists assumed the unification to have become positive law only when the conditions of rest and inheritance be attained, or in the days of Solomon. Later Deuteronomistic authors conceived of the unification as being enforced immediately upon the conquest, when the tent of meeting was established at Shiloh. These, however, were just unhistorical theories. In practice, the Deuteronomic law was enforced in the days of Josiah only. Therefore, the Deuteronomistic scribes were confronted with the problem how to describe the cultic realities before Josiah, as these contradicted their legal conceptions.
How do we rewrite history so that we were always right the whole time?
Okay, on that same verse, the tent of meeting, it is mentioned in Joshua only here and in 1951. Kimchi and Gersonides wrote that the tent of meeting was at Gilgal during the first 14 years since the Israelites came to the land. Ahituv writes that it seems like this tent was always at Shiloh, and the tradition associated it to the days of Joshua. He notes that this tent is not mentioned in Judges and stood at Shiloh until its destruction in the 11th century BCE. Eventually, the tent was known as the House of Yahweh, seen in 1 Samuel 1:7. And Butler comments, in this passage, the use of the tent of meeting is explicitly theological. The tradition itself may have been used to explain how the tent came to be in Shiloh. In the present literary context of the Bible, the tent shows that Israel completely obeyed the will of God and that the division of the land to the 7 tribes took place in the divine presence. It is also striking that the setting up of the symbol of access to Yahweh is done only when the land had rest from war. Joining tent and Shiloh focuses attention on the name of Israel as a worshiping community in the covenantal relationship with Yahweh. The assembly at Shiloh affirms that the presence of God with Israel in covenant relationship has now been realized in the land, end quote. And Bede wrote that the tabernacle with the sea to its west symbolizes the relationship between the saints and the reprobate. Of course.
Yeah, but one of the things, by the way, is that there's like this idea that the tabernacle was in Gilgal for during the conquest because they were too busy to find a permanent place for it. And then when they brought it to Shiloh, they built like a stone structure. They kept it still didn't have a roof, so they used the original tabernacle tapestry covering. Instead of using the beams, they actually built something a bit more permanent.
Interesting. I wasn't familiar with that tradition. Although I know that in later stories they talk about carrying it into battle in certain circumstances, but
they didn't carry the tabernacle, right? They carried the
the ark. The ark specifically.
Yeah.
In some stories, not all of them, obviously.
Yeah.
Now, the country was brought under their control. Rashi comments that once the tent or tabernacle was established, it was easier to conquer the land. Kara wrote that it was the occupation of the land that caused the tabernacle to be built, since the Torah commands to live in security and place the tent of meeting after they resided in the land, according to Deuteronomy 12, verses 10 through 11. Dozeman writes that this may be an inner biblical reference to the priestly creation story in Genesis 1:28, when God blesses humans and commands them to, quote, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and take possession of it. On verses 2 through 10, Nelson comments, and sorry, it's a bit long. Although many interpreters have seen verses 2 to 10 as a traditional oral story connected to Shiloh, it is more likely to be a literary creation intended to introduce the material that follows. It is difficult to imagine what purpose there could have been for a tradition that told only of these particular 7 scattered tribes. The narrative only makes sense, as verses 5 and 7 make clear, in the present redactional shape of Joshua. It was designed precisely and exclusively for its present literary context. Starting from the presupposition that the rest of the land has already been apportioned, it reports Joshua's division of the remainder to the remaining 7 tribes. It grows out of a narratival need for a fair division into 7 smaller parcels for 7 remaining tribes and the author's possession of a source document or documents describing that territory. Although some have taken the Survey Commission as an earlier mechanism of division, later overlaid by the use of the lot, from a narratival perspective, this committee answers the need for a fair and equal division, while at the same time providing an etiology for the author's source in the document, quote unquote, of verse 9. The narrative intends to convince readers that this subsequent division was done in a completely proper manner, that is, by Joshua through the lot in the context of an assembly of the whole nation. Tribal territories were determined fairly by a representative survey committee and parceled out in Yahweh's approving presence, the tent of meeting in verse 1 and before Yahweh in verse 10. End quote. Dozeman, following Grossel and Nelson, interprets verses 1 through 10 as the composition of one author who is, quote, writing the account of land distribution to the 7 remaining Western tribes based on the concept of the 12-tribe system of pan-Israelite identity. The author's reuse of Pentateuch literature with the mixing of priestly and Deuteronomistic motifs suggests a late composition sometime in the post-exilic period. On verse 6, I will cast lots for you. Butler, citing J. Cornelis de Vos, writes that Judah and Joseph do not have lots thrown for them, but are designated as lots or allotments. Since lots had to be cast on holy ground, Judah and Joseph are set up as holy allotments, while the other tribes have lots indirectly connected to the will of God. The tent of meeting is set up in the middle of holy ground, or on the even holier area. He further writes, this places subsequent responsibility for the division of the land itself upon the tribal representatives. Joshua has only to give out what has already been divided. The tribal representatives have already agreed on the distribution of the land as being fair and equitable. God could not be criticized for making an unfair division of the land. God's part was simply to show which tribe received the parts already divided and designated by the commission. Now that the tribes have indicated their readiness to obey, the reference to God changes. He is no longer the God of your fathers in verse 3, he is our God. On verses 11 through 20, Dozeman comments, the borders of Benjamin are not based on a source document. They represent the literary design of the author of Joshua, as was also the case in Joshua 13, 15 through 17. The aim of the author is to describe the borders, quote unquote, of Benjamin, rather than simply the region. The Hebrew givul occurs 10 times. The opening reference may be directed to the general region of Benjamin, the region of their lot in verse 11. All other occurrences describe the northern and southern borders of Benjamin. The borders of Benjamin are closely tied to the territories of Judah and Joseph, so much so that the borders are determined before 18 verses 11 to 20, in the descriptions of the northern border of Judah, 15, 5b through 11, and of the southern border of the sons of Joseph, 16, 1 to 3. That's it for my counter at this part. You are Mr.
And are we ready to move on to the next chapter?
No, chapter. We have still 21 to 28 to read.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were finished with that. Go ahead.
I finished we finished reading up 1 through 20, right? Yeah.
All right.
Now
So
we
it
left
was Lawrence
21.
reading.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good luck.
Should we continue?
Oh, thank you. Looks like I'm going to need it. Now the towns of the tribe of Benjamin, according to their families, were Jericho, Beth Hogla, Emekhaziz, Beth Araba, Zemarim, Bethel, Avim, Para, Ofra. Oh fuck! Hold up! Yeah.
You want me to take over?
Shafaromi, Shafaromoni,
Nope.
Ofni. Close enough.
Ofni and Giba, 12
Spell
towns.
It's easy to say kfar. Kfar.
Kfaramoni.
Kfar ha'amona. I mean, there is a Keren Ketiv here, so I guess.
Yeah, and also
Either
some
way,
a lot of
Ofni-
transliterations skip out on the ha, which is like the. Yeah.
Ofni and Geba, 12 towns with their villages. Gibeon, Rama, Biroth, Mizpah. Oh, I'm guessing this is the same kind of shit as before. Shafira,
Kefira.
Moza, Rechem,
Kafir.
Irpil?
UPL.
Irpil. Yeah, that would make sense
Irpil.
because I remember, no diphthongs, right? Okay. Tarala, Zela, He'elef, or Halef, Jebus, that is Jerusalem. It also could be read as Jebus, because I'm sure Arn would like that. Gibeah and Kiriath Jearim, 14 towns with their villages. This is the inheritance of the tribe of Benjamin according to its families.
Yeah, there's an interesting thing to note here that the reading is literally Kiryat Arim Arbaisre V'Chatzaren. Literally Kiryat, 14 towns with their villages, but it seems like the emendation yields and Kiryat Yarim. Maybe Septuagint has a different reading there.
Are you sure this isn't an ancient sleep spell? Because I'm just nodding right the fuck off.
And I'm wondering, why is this? This is God's breathed word, right? And this is the information we need.
Why not?
Why? There's so many things that if you were a ruler of the cosmos, you uber galactic overlord, you've created 11 trillion different galaxies, and you want to impart information on these one people right here, because you're this one little speck of dust is the reason the cosmos exists. The Earth was the first thing in all of the collective galaxies. The first thing is our planet, and then everything else was made around it. So we're the center of attention, and God's going to impart all this information on us. He's going to tell us how to live. He's going to warn us about why we should wash our hands. He's going to tell us all these important things, right? But he doesn't. Oh, I created all you people so that you will randomly slaughter each other for no fucking reason.
Well, the
I mean, it's
descendants.
evidence of the writers.
So I am checking. So there are, of course, different our versions of the Septuagint, the two main texts that were used for this Ralph's Handhart Septuaginta, do differ in quite a few ways. Not just like spelling, but kind of what it says here, even in in 28. So
I should throw in there that Iconoker says that Lawrence pronounces place names like a necromancer performing a ritual.
Cool.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, as response to what Aaron said, like this, it seems to be evidence that the people who wrote this didn't see God in that way, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Like
definitely.
they didn't. Yeah, they
this
didn't
wasn't
think
a
that God was
concept of
like,
God when this was written. The magic uber galactic overlord.
It made
at
sense
all.
to them that he would care about which specific towns and borders were,
God was extremely
given to them.
provincial back then.
Yeah, but yeah, one version of the Septuagint says Kai Gabaothiarim. So that's that does say and and then another version says and Gabaath and the city Ierim.
Yeah.
So it separates them into two cities.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll commentary on verses 21 to 24. Nelson comments, although located in the territory of the Kingdom of Israel, this northeast Benjamin district must also have been linked in some way to the Kingdom of Judah. This is the only way it could have ended up as part of the same source as the 11 districts of Judah in chapter 15, and the Benjamin district inside the southern kingdom's territory, verses 25 to 28. Verses 21 to 24 thus must describe a supplementary 13th district added to this earlier system of 12. The presence of Beth Araba in both a Judah district and this extra quote-unquote Northeast Benjamin district also suggests a modification of an earlier system. This supplementary District 13 can only stem from some time when Judah controlled Northeast Benjamin and Southern Ephraim, Bethel and Ophrah. The most reasonable hypothesis is the region of Josiah, whose reform touched not only Bethel, but included Geba, verse 24. Thus, verses 21 to 24 represent Benjaminite towns which were once part of the kingdom of Israel and then the Assyrian province of Samaria, but eventually were included into an expanded Judah, presumably at the time of Josiah. And finally, verse 28, the Jebusite city...
Just
Yes.
one more thing about the Benjamite areas. So it seems that there's, if you go to Nehemiah, it talks about Benjamite cities as well, and it mentions some of these, like it mentions Ramah, but it mentions a whole bunch of other towns, and some of these seem to be in this northeastern area, but not mentioned now. So almost like a whole district is missing. And some of them are like, in southwestern Manasseh area, whatever. Like it's not even part of the. There's places like let's see which ones, like Lod, for example, which we know where it is in modern Israel. Lod is a big city. Lod is mentioned as a Benjamite city, which is outside of the borders that we've just mentioned, but it also mentions things like. Michmash, the Gebar again, a different Gebar, I guess. What else? Nov. These places are mentioned as Benjamite cities, and they're not mentioned at all in this section. It's almost like there's a whole district missing from this rundown.
And finally, on verse 28, the Jebusite city that is Jerusalem. Hebrew Bible reads, the Jebusite that is Jerusalem. Ahituv notes that Jerusalem here is in Benjamin's territory and not Judah. He further writes, this can only be in a later period, during the days of the kingdom, when Benjamin had long been an integral part of the kingdom of Judah, and its loyalty to the house of David was unquestioned. It seems that only after the downfall of the kingdom of Israel, the doubts about the loyalty of the residents of Benjamin to the house of David have finally disappeared. Already, Hezekiah's period can fit a map in which Jerusalem was included in Benjamin. But it was Josiah who expanded his sphere of influence northward, as we learned from the purification of the high places from Geba to Beersheba in 2 Kings 23:8, and even north from there, according to 2 Chronicles 34:6, which could position Jerusalem in the adjacent Benjamin territory. The affinity between Benjamin's territory and Jerusalem also rises from the reality described during the days of Jeremiah, born at the nearby Anatot, and from the geographical state of Benjamin towns. End quote. And Augustine and Origen took the building of Jerusalem upon the former city of Jebus as a metaphor for conversion.
Obviously.
Obviously. And
there's some way to stick Jesus in there. There's got to be.
Oh, and there's also Augustine who wrote that.
Like, Jebus, Jebusite,
Yeah. And also Augustine who writes that, like the cities of Babylon and Jerusalem depict the age-old intermingling of confusion and the vision of peace to be severed at the end of the world.
Sure.
All right, then are we ready to move?
I don't think so. I mean, verse 19 is, what is it? 51 verses.
Yeah. Verse 19, not verse, chapter 19 is
Chapter
pretty
19,
long.
sorry. Yes.
Okay.
But there is not a lot to say about this, so we'll grant him that.
All right, are we going to plow through this as Lilith requested?
We could, or we could do 19, 20, and 21, and then do 22, 23, and 24. Then do 3 chapters for the next 2.
Okay.
I'm fine with that, especially if we plow through 19 right away, because it's
I have commentary, however, so I'll have to plow.
Yeah, I
through
don't.
that.
I mean, we've only got 15 minutes left, and
Right.
actually,
So
Yeah.
I kind of gotta go.
Thank you, Peter.
So we can
Yeah,
do.
and I've got another appointment after this too, so I'm going to have
right.
to get off. So that's
So
fine.
let's
So we get
call
Yeah,
it
19, 20,
18.
21 next time.
We
Yeah,
got
we're
quite
2
a
more
bit
weeks of
through.
Joshua then.
We got quite a bit done. So.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's only 2 meetings and we're done with, or maybe 3. I don't know.
Probably
We're
2,
done with Joshua.
honestly.
Yeah, but the last chapter is a bit heavy.
Yeah, it's gonna be long and an important one.
Yes.
But we'll get.
Yeah.
Okay.
It'll be a little less somnorific. What was the term? Somnophilic. Yeah, it'll be more interesting.
What's really you don't find it exciting to hear about that this land from this rock over here to this other weird little town to the river to the sea, this all belonged to the whoever they are and the Jebusites or the Claudites or whatever the fuck had this other place from
Well,
the cactus
I
back
find the whole we have to slaughter them all very disturbing, but that's kind of every other line in this fucking book, which means I'll point it out that it's evil and disgusting and wrong, and we shouldn't live together.
It amazes me still that this is touted as wisdom and written by a character who is the embodiment of love.
We're not even at the wisdom literature yet.
Yeah, God is love. Love is the
and at the same time, they'll be like, we don't do the Old Testament.
Oh, yeah. We don't.
Somebody told me again today that they were freed from the Mosaic Law. They don't have to obey any of those old laws of Moses anymore because Jesus said so.
Well, I mean, there was the whole thing about, and I mean, it's not that necessarily Jesus said so, but it's that in I think it was in one of the Pauline epistles, or definitely in one of the epistles.
Yeah, a follower of Paul wrote Luke Acts, and he did this story with Peter and the food with the animals and the sheep and all that vision.
There's
but
that
the
one,
debate, the debate also was included in Acts, but there's lots of references to it in the Pauline epistles that he was advocating for, not requiring anything but abstaining from sexual immorality and food offered to idols. So
yeah, there was.
I said that according to my Bible, Jesus says you have to obey every jot and tittle of all those old Mosaic laws.
Yeah.
That's the Matthew version of Jesus, who was
Matthew
a little
version
more
is the very Jewish version.
Jewish, yeah. The Luke version, which is more Greek, says you don't. And like I said, the free market voted, and the version where you don't have to snip your dick won the popular vote.
Right. Yeah. You
can't imagine why.
Yeah. There was also one of the epistles. It may have been a Pauline one. It may have been a different one. Said that there was this whole section about Jesus and his words superseding the words of Moses. I forget which one it is, but there was a whole section about it.
So as to the part that I quoted, where Jesus said that he's here to fulfill the law, and you have to follow every jot and tittle, lest ye be called least in heaven.
We said that not a jot or tittle of the law will
by any means
all time comes to pass.
All the way until all things until it is all accomplished.
Yeah.
But then that gave them the caveat of we can say that Christ fulfilled the law and accomplished it through his act of. So now,
It did say until heaven
Jesus
and earth pass,
crucified so that,
and both are still here. Last I looked.
Yeah. I don't see where because Christians bring this up a lot, and I've never seen any place where Jesus says, "No, you don't have to obey those old Mosaic laws anymore." And even if Jesus did say that, why are the Christians still pointing back to the Ten Commandments? Hey, I thought you were freed from those.
Well, yeah, they're that's dumb. Like the thing is, because Jesus in I forget which gospel it was, but he cites the whole love thy neighbor thing as being like the most important one, right? And then like another one. But
It's like, okay, you have to look back to Leviticus where it says that homosexuality is a sin, but it doesn't matter when it says in Leviticus that you can't eat shellfish or get tattoos.
Well, lucky for them. Actually, very and unlucky for us. There is that whole thing in Romans 1 that is very clearly anti-gay, and it doesn't really rely on Leviticus.
It just relied on Paul being a vengeful incel.
Yeah.
Which
you mean like the head of the like American Family Council or whatever that is so very anti-gay until he gets caught with a Brazilian rent-a-boy whose resume boasts of an 8-inch uncut penis.
Yeah, that's pretty much the trend, isn't it? It seems to be the trend at all times for all ages of Christianity and many other religions.
So that's what Paul's problem was. He was one of those sort of people. Like that other anti-gay, the other anti-gay hate preacher who was caught having sex with a man in a van outside of his church.
Was that the one who said it was just because he wanted to buy meth off him?
I mean, you could park the van somewhere, maybe not in front of the church.
he couldn't handle it. He had to have it now.
No,
he needed to park it down by the river.
He needed a place to be. It needed to be a very convenient location. So right after the sin, he went and repented. He was thinking economically.
Okay. Dara O'Kane says the Old Testament does contradict New and Quran. Jesus and Muhammad said anybody can convert, but here it says you have to be born a Jew. You can't convert.
Well, that's not accurate.
That was something that developed at the time,
convert.
I think.
Yeah, it was developed.
Yeah,
there was always conversion possible to Judaism, but it was.
Yeah, and we get it pretty early on with like Ruth and.
Yeah. So there is like a precedence for that.
Even Joshua, like with Rachav.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's
that I mean the only convert to Judaism that I know of was Sammy Davis Jr. And it's a funny thing that he converted to Judaism from Satanism.
No way.
Practically nobody knows that Sammy Davis Jr. was a Satanist. Which
I have no idea.
Terribly funny.
As many people that knew he was Jewish. No.
Exactly. And I see that as a step down. I apologize.
Depends the type of Judaism.
That's just mean to say about Sammy Davis Jr.
What kind of Satanism too?
Arn, that's just mean saying about Sammy Davis Jr. That's a step down. I mean, it was a small problem.
You know what? I hope it worked for him.
I mean,
going
from
major
Satanism, he went from LaVeyan Satanism to Judaism, but it's still that's a step from atheism to theism, and so therefore is a step down.
I think there are a lot of atheist Jews. I do.
Yeah, especially
there are a lot of atheist
Reform
Jews.
Judaism is very big, and like they're not very big on whether you have to believe or not. It's more like, I don't know. I guess it depends on the.
You have to rub it in.
We don't care whether you believe or not.
And my grandpa's an atheist.
Isaac has to rub it in.
God, but then
not very big.
What?
Sammy Davis Jr. Not very big. We get it. He wasn't very big.
Oh, stop
I didn't say
it!
that.
This is not the time for short jokes.
I didn't
Stop
say
it.
that. I said that Reform Judaism is a very large, is very big, especially in America. It's one of the largest groups. If not,
It's so big they had to cut the tip of it off just to fit in.
Shout out.
So yeah, because my grandpa somehow has this idea that there is no God, but also that Moses definitely led the people out of Egypt, and like it I don't know. Okay, listen, he's not, and I don't know.
Yeah, it's confusing.
I really
You know
don't
what?
totally get it.
He's old. He's entitled to just drink and fuck with people.
Okay. Dara O'Kane says the idea of modern Christianity is there is no chosen people. Anybody can convert. That's why Muslims and Christians have fans in every country and of every race.
I think
Yeah,
he's getting
conversion is
things
definitely a lot
confused.
easier in Islam and Christianity than Judaism. Because in Judaism, you have to go through
But
this whole
it's not
fucking
like
thing.
it's not that Judaism you can't convert.
It's
Yeah,
just
it's not in
harder.
Judaism you can't convert, therefore chosen people, non-chosen people. It's you don't have to convert. Chosen people means chosen to do a specific job, and Christianity.
Oh.
Well,
it's
Isaac
a
glitches
religion.
out a little bit. I think I want to say that it sounds like the way Christians justify Trump.
Mhm.
That it doesn't matter that he cheated on his wife with a porn star while his wife was nursing their newborn baby. It just doesn't matter anything that is not Christian about him, because Trump is just what is the word, Lilith? I think you might know that where God chooses the imperfect implement to enact.
Oh, where he ordains and chooses and lays his hand upon the most fucked up person he can find, so that you will know that the victory is through him and from his glory, and not because of the virtue of the person themselves, who's obviously a complete fucking idiot.
Which is a theme we've seen so often, that when I heard Jake and Elwood say we're on a mission from God, it perfectly fit.
Mm-hmm. It's a very well established way for con men to get people who either are or feel intellectually inferior on their side. The humility and simplicity of our story is what appeals to the humble. Your humility is a virtue. Your, lack of intellectualism means that you have a deeper wisdom, and blah, 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 blah. So people who perhaps feel put down by people who do have intellectual interests and pursuits, because that's what they like to do, can kind of get their own back and feel important because they have been selected by God to have the deeper wisdom to see what a blind chipmunk could tell was a dirty con man's rat game.
Matthew K says, panel, isn't the stuff that is in Luke mostly said by Paul rather than Jesus?
I don't know the New Testament. I can't tell
Paul
you.
was
Sorry.
definitely one of the sources, but the author of Luke probably used other sources as well, and some of it.
Tomer, how could you not know the New Testament? I mean, you're
I wonder why.
You have to be taught the Bible, right? God's infallible, God-breathed, 100% accurate word.
Yeah, and it's
Not
interesting.
your
They think
Bible.
everyone knows the Bible, but also, have you heard of the good news?
Yes.
But I will give Tomer credit that he is learning the entire. He's learning slowly the entire God-breathed, 100% accurate, word of God, because he's going to be reading the New Testament with the rest of us. He's already reading the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, you're gonna need the New Testament at some point. I'm actually very curious to see how it goes once we get to the New Testament and how Tomer's commentary is gonna go.
Yeah, I also wonder, because I don't know Greek, so I'll try my hardest.
I'm just for anybody else that may be listening to this and not understand what we're talking about. Just try to imagine that you were raised Baptist or Pentecostal or whatever, and now you're told that you have to also integrate the Book of Mormon into your studies.
I recommend drugs. Enough weed, you will find a connection.
Okay. Do we have anything else to say, or are we going to close this up?
Obviously, join the Discord.
Yep. Join it.
Which Arn is now in.
Yep.
And I think he hasn't posted a damn thing.
No, he did not. Well, I pinged him.
Do I have to post things?
Yes, you have to, Arn. This is by the rules.
You can sit at your computer all day and chit chat with people.
Or upload or download Discord to your app, to your mobile. So
good idea.
No, it's fine.
What you mean? You want me to infect my phone too?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Join the dark side. We have.
I mean, I don't know. There's certain conversations.
State of modern communication, Arn.
Dr. Kip and
Arn is so going to regret that he joined.
That I have.
If you think
Okay,
Twitter
well,
is
it's not
bad,
that I ever
Arn,
open the program or anything.
if you think Twitter is bad, you haven't seen
No,
Discord
there's
yet.
a reason that I spent years. No,
What?
there's a reason I haven't joined Discord in years. I was on it years ago.
Oh my god,
Mm.
guys!
What are you
guys,
saying,
okay.
Peter?
One time.
Peter.
One time was
Well,
enough.
Peter-
I don't ever need to open that program again.
Peter barely posts in it either way, but like,
Yeah.
do you guys even read what happens? We have like one conspiracy theorist in there, and he's just kind of fun
Yeah.
to mess with sometimes. But like aside from that, like everything's just chill. Like
Yeah.
like
On your
Milwaukee
server,
Atheist Discord,
on your
we keep
server,
shit locked
yes.
down.
On your
Different
server, yes.
servers
But
are
I'm
different.
in
Yeah.
several
Yeah.
other servers
Yeah.
which are completely
But
different.
we only want Aaron to come to the Milwaukee Atheist server where it's not crazy and there's just one lunatic who's
I
kind of
have
funny.
to be on the one for the line.
That
So
too.
two.
Yeah. So and I don't know. Okay, so now I've got it. I've got the app or whatever installed on my computer, and as long as I don't open it, I guess I'm okay.
As
Oh,
long as you don't join
Arn, by
other
the way,
Discords, other
Arn, by the
servers,
way,
then you're fine.
Tsumami is in chat, and she's also in the Discord server, in Lawrence's Discord server. Tsumami.
Who?
Tsumami.
To mommy.
She's adamant she did not make all those photoshops of you. She didn't. Really, she didn't.
It was Comer.
Oh no.
Okay.
Oh, that's right. Okay, yeah, we need to make sure Arn is tagged in all of those.
Mhm.
No.
I didn't even post some of the pictures I made about. with
There are a
Aaron.
few really good ones,
Okay.
Arn. You should really check them out.
All right.
There's a really
Yeah,
solid
you
one.
guys are
with,
making me dread being on the internet.
there's a really great one where.
How has the internet not already done that?
No,
Come
yeah.
on, this is not your first day here.
I like the one where it's like Lawrence's face, Jesus' body, and then a pair of boobs. Like
That's the
really
one I
good.
was thinking
We,
of. Yeah,
we have some new joiners. So
good,
Thank
good. See
Okay.
the moment we say that that Arn is in there, they're like, oh, we gotta head over there now.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Maybe
Am
we'll
I
see some
in
moderation.
there?
Yeah,
you are. You are.
All right,
All right.
boys. I need to rest. Let's go.
I need to go as well.
I love you all. Thank
Okay.
you. We will see you
Hasta
next
la
week.
pasta y
Bye.
bias nachos.
Bye, everybody.
Amen.
Blah blah.